CD 7.
There is a body of thought within what you might call the establishment that some extreme measures are called for. Like further civil liberty restrictions, banning people from meeting up, closing the schools again, that kind of thing. No, because all those things are very public. There would be an outcry amongst the public, which they might follow through with at the ballot box. Normal electoral government still exists in this country. We haven't yet abandoned it for a national government type arrangement. So all the old political concerns about re-election remain. But in private, politicians, civil servants and the like all remain bound by the same ethical codes that govern their public work, until someone tells them otherwise. And did someone? Yes. The inner sanctum of the government decided that the time had come to delegate a certain amount of power to their senior civil servants, along with a number of not insignificant budgets. These powers and resources would allow them to take a more robust approach to tackling the virus than politicians would feel happy defending in public. And both sides were happy with this. The civil servants could work with the NHS, universities and so on to do what needs to be done, and the politicians get plausible deniability if the civil servants get it wrong. A 21st century spin on acting under Millwood orders. How do you know this? Were you part of one of these projects? Goodness, no. Nobody would trust me to take part in something as cloak and dagger as a Millwood project. What actually happened was that some months ago, I received an anonymous email alerting me to concerns about the government's response to the virus. There was a certain reticence to the conversation, but we exchanged enough emails for trust to develop, to the point where we met in person. My contact was the first to tell me about the term Millwood orders, although I was aware that in a crisis situation, of course, the government would likely take extreme measures. What were the extreme measures? The one that I was made aware of was an unregulated antiviral drug trial in one of the more impoverished areas of Central Africa, using children, mainly street children, as the research subjects. The kind of experimental left-field research that would never have got through a university ethics committee in this country, with good reason. Within weeks of the research starting, there were child deaths. Mona stared at the professor. That's appalling. Absolutely, yes. To anyone with a conscience. A thought struck her. Your contact? Was he or she a civil servant? He smiled. Jasper Connington, late of this parish. I had some dealings with him through my work at the university, which may have been why he chose to ask for my assistance. A lovely man, but probably not cut out for the politics of the virus. He was appalled by what they were being asked to do, but couldn't see a way out. Were his colleagues equally appalled? He said there was a difference of opinion between them. One of his colleagues shared his views. The other was much more committed to the project. Which colleague? I've no idea. Jasper didn't share any more than he absolutely had to with me. I didn't know the names of his colleagues on the project, but obviously I could make an educated guess who might have been involved. It would come as no surprise, for example, if poor Nathan McVie was also part of this project. It wouldn't surprise her either. She thought back to the box of evidence locked away in their office. I think Helen Sopel's disappearance is linked to Millwood orders. She left a box of evidence with a friend in case anything should happen to her, which it now obviously has. One of the things that was in it was a picture of a woman in a 1950s dress. I bet it was a still of Hilda Millwood. A great big warning to her colleagues of exactly how much she knew. She frowned. Stuttle didn't recognise her, though. I'd have thought he'd know all about Millwood orders. The professor gave a loud, throaty chuckle. Oh, yes. Mr. Stuttle would most definitely be involved in that kind of thing. However, there's nothing to say he'd actually seen the film. I'm led to believe by my source that the film was a source of much entertainment to the upper echelons of the civil service. I'm not sure Mr. Stuttle would be on the invite list for wine, cheese and a private viewing of Thrive and Prosper. Nor do I think he is of the persuasion to spend a lot of time debating where the Millwood in Millwood orders actually derived from. So, Mr. Connington told you all about Millwood orders? And what else? What Jasper gave me was enough information to publicly denounce the project in my speech at the Parliament, if I'd been able to give it. Do you think Mr. Connington really took an overdose? Could someone have? I think he was depressed enough about the situation to have tried to kill himself. But then, I suppose I am old and unfit enough to have had a heart attack. So, Mona, said Teresa, the silly old fool starts poking around in things and has a heart attack. Jasper Connington unexpectedly takes his own life. Can you guess what I'm about to say to you? Be careful. No, Teresa looked furious. Don't be careful. Don't get involved at all. Go back to work and get on with your day job. Keep your head down until all this virus nonsense is over and done with. And live your life. You're young. Sandy had no right involving you in any of this in London. And he has no right involving you now. She glared at both of them. You're right, Tess. Of course you're right. You're always right. I'm sorry, Mona. You should probably leave now. He opened the kitchen door and gestured to her to leave, following her back down the narrow corridor. Go back to work, he said, loudly. Keep your head down, find yourself a nice young man, and go and have some babies. He reached over her shoulder to open the door. And Mona, his voice dropped to a whisper, be very, very careful. Chapter 7. Bernard hugged his rucksack to him, Annika's phone safely tucked in the middle pocket. When he'd approached one of the firemen for permission to pop back into the building, he'd been met with an outright no. The fireman had been adamant that no one was returning to the building under any circumstances, and it didn't matter how many times Cameron Stuttle's name was invoked. He had, however, proved remarkably amenable to retrieving the phone for him, and had been the recipient of much gratitude as a result. Now Bernard was not going to let the phone out of his sight until he had downloaded all the messages on it. So, that was the good news. The bad news was that he had literally no idea what to say to Marcus. Surely no amount of debt could persuade someone to plant a bomb. Nothing short of a full-on radicalization program could change a mild-mannered computer technician into the kind of person who would explode government property. And surely he would have noticed some change in his behaviour. Bernard had spent enough nights on Marcus's floor to be convinced that his friend's fear of interest had not strayed from its fairly narrow focus of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Serenity, and the earlier works of George Lucas. Furthermore, where would Marcus have developed the skills to create an incendiary device? He might be a whiz when it came to identifying why your printer wasn't working, but Bernard had first-hand experience of watching him cock up simple household tasks. Marcus's attempt to change the living room light bulb had ended up with a smashed glass, a broken stepladder, and Bernard running for his life to avoid being crushed by the flying body of an IT technician. The only person Marcus was likely to blow up successfully was himself, and possibly Bernard, sleeping unawares on his inflatable mattress. Bernard walked slowly up the driveway to Fettes, lost in his own thoughts. It would have been good to have another chat with Bryce before confronting Marcus. He had his fingers crossed that they were both in, and that he could somehow have a private conversation with Bryce before he tackled Marcus. There were some details he really wanted to pin down. Bryce had been very sure that online gambling was the issue, but perhaps he'd been wrong about that. It could have been a completely different issue. And exactly who was Marcus selling information to? Bryce had been completely adamant, but on little information that Bernard could see. At Police Scotland HQ, he signed in at the reception desk and headed down to the IT unit. Peering through the small pane of glass on the door, he could see Marcus's jean-clad backside sticking out from under a desk, probably working on a hard drive. He scanned the room as best he could, with his limited field of vision. Unfortunately, there didn't appear to be any sign of Bryce. He tapped gently on the glass. Marcus emerged, smiled, and buzzed him in. "Bernard, you're alive, unhurt, unscathed by the terrible events at your office," He looked genuinely pleased. If this was a bluff, it was a good one. "Is everyone else okay?" he asked anxiously. "Mona all right?" When all this was over, he was really going to have to manage Marcus's expectations about Mona. "She's fine. Everyone was out of the building in time, except for Maitland, and even he wasn't hurt." The phone on Marcus's desk started to ring. "Do you need to—" The phone on Bryce's desk also began to ring. "There's no point in me answering them, Bernard. They're all phoning to say the same thing. My computer isn't working, or I can't log into the HIT website. It's devastation out there. All our systems are down." "Because of the explosion?" He shook his head. "No, although maybe not unrelated to it. I think we've been infected with a virus, which is ironic because the whole point of our computer system is to fight the virus." "Ha! I hadn't really considered until today that we have imported wholesale the language of illness into the world of computers. Viruses, bugs, and not unlike a doctor, I make a diagnosis, then I take action." He started wandering round the room, stopping now and then to peer down the back of desks and cabinets. Bernard watched him. He certainly sounded like his usual self, talking the same nonsense he always tended to spout. The anxious pacing was new, though, and could be indicative of an unstable mind. He decided to push a little bit. "Doctors have the Hippocratic Oath. Do IT technicians also agree to do no harm?" "Do no harm?" The pacing stopped and Marcus pivoted round toward him. He regarded him impassively from behind his little round specs, then looked over his shoulder. "I don't think you closed the door properly when you came in, Bernard." He strode over and grabbed the handle. The door gave a soft thump sound as it closed. "We need to keep this room secure." Bernard experienced a slight feeling of unease. Whenever he visited, Marcus always buzzed him in and then showed him out. He never paid much attention to the mechanics of it before, but now that he thought about it, he wasn't sure how you opened the door from the inside of the room. He had struggled to believe Bryce's take on the situation, but Marcus was behaving weirdly, and for good or for ill, Bernard was effectively trapped down here with him. Despite the lack of available exits, he decided to do a little more pushing. "I don't know if you were aware of this, but the explosion took place in the room housing our server." "Really?" Marcus was pacing again, still, it seemed, searching for something hidden in the room. "I'm beginning to think this was deliberate, Bernard. If they've knocked out both the server and the system, then we're in real trouble. Bryce picked the wrong day to be off sick." "He's off sick? Today of all days?" "I assume so. I have to say it's not like him. I've never known him to take a sickie before, but he went out yesterday and he's not been back." There was a niggle at the back of Bernard's mind. Bryce. Bryce, who was uncharacteristically off sick on the day that IT hell had broken loose. "How did they get access to the server room?" asked Marcus. "That room is kept locked. Someone can just wander in there." All the time he was talking, Marcus was keeping up his relentless searching of the room. Bernard sincerely hoped that he wasn't hunting for a blunt object to aim at his head. "I know." He wasn't sure how to ask the question. "Is there, anything you want to tell me, Marcus?" Marcus stopped dead. His head dropped onto his chest, and he half sat, half leaned against a desk, as if his legs could no longer support him. "Oh dear, oh dear." "Marcus?" He looked back up at him, and Bernard was horrified to see the hugely guilty expression on his face. "Sorry." "I was hoping you were going to deny it." He started planning Marcus's defence. He must have been brainwashed. That was the only explanation. It couldn't have been a reaction to stress, as Marcus was generally the least stressed person on the planet. He'd certainly be happy to provide Marcus with a character reference, for what it was worth. "I'm an idiot. You're not going to tell anyone, are you?" Marcus really had lost the plot if he thought he could keep this to himself. "I'll have to, His mobile rang, and Patterson's name flashed up on the screen. "Bernard, are you with Marcus?" His voice was unusually soft. "Yes." "Okay. Just listen. Don't say anything. Stuttle has just had the results of the phone trace on the warning call for the bomb." There was a sigh at the other end of the line. "It came from a mobile, registered to Marcus." Marcus was crawling around the floor, the locus of his searching now apparently focusing on the under-desk area. "Bernard, are you listening?" Yes, sorry." "Is he there with you?" "Yes." "Just keep him talking. The Fetis guys are checking his locker, and someone's going to be down to arrest him." "But—" "Don't tell him anything. Help is on its way." He ended the call and tucked his phone back into his pocket. Marcus was still on all fours in the footwell. "Marcus," he said quietly, crouching down beside him. "Why did you do it?" "Do what?" "The bomb, Marcus, obviously. Why did you plant the bomb?" "Ow!" Marcus banged his head in his hurry to retreat. "Are you insane? I didn't do that." "But you said you had something to tell me." Bernard was increasingly confused. "And what are you looking so guilty about?" "I've lost my keys, including the one to the server room. It's a disciplinary offence." "Have you also lost your mobile phone?" "My whole bag's gone." Marcus sighed and sat back on his heels. He gave Bernard a long, searching look. "I'm only going to ask you this once, and if you say you didn't, I'll believe you. Did you take my bag?" "Me?" Bernard toppled over in surprise and sat with his legs sprawled in front of him. "Why would I take your bag?" "To get access to the server, to plant the bomb." "Now, who's insane? Why would I do that?" "Well, Bryce said you were going through a few difficulties, with the breakup of your marriage and everything, and that you were maybe, having a nervous breakdown." "Bryce said that?" "Yes, he said it was probably just as well you were moving out, because he was a bit worried that you were going to do something stupid." He contemplated him. "When I heard about the explosion, I just had this moment of doubt that it might have been something to do with you." Bryce, who was off sick. Fury started to burn within him. Then he realised that they didn't have a lot of time. He glanced over at the door. No one had arrived yet. "I don't suppose you've already reported your bag missing?" Marcus shook his head. "I was hoping to find it before I had to fess up." "Marcus, how well do you know Bryce?" "Well enough. He's a colleague and a friend." "Have you ever been to his house?" "Well, no." "Met his family?" "They're back in Ireland." "Met any of his other friends?" "I don't think he has any." "Do you have a gambling problem, playing online poker, casino games?" Marcus was looking more confused by the minute. "No, it's a mugs game. Virtual House always wins and all that. Why are you—" "Shut up and listen. I think Bryce has set you up to take the fall for the bomb at our offices. Depending on which way things turn out, I think he was lining me up to be a potential patsy as well." "Bryce?" Marcus's eyes were almost as big and round as his specs. "You think Bryce set the bomb?" "Yes, I do. And you know how he told you I was having a nervous breakdown? Well, he's been making up stories about you too. He told me, and I suppose quite possibly told other people, that you've been taking bribes." "Bribes?" "And I think he used your phone to call in the bomb warning." "Oh my God, but why?" "I don't know, I really don't. But I do know that the police are coming to arrest you." Right on cue, there was a tap on the door. "What do I do?" "Tell them the truth. Tell them about your bag going missing, with your phone in it. Tell them as much as you know about Bryce, and that he's not turned up at work today. And I'll tell them what I know." The knocking on the door grew more aggressive. He stood up to see a pair of ferocious eyes staring through the glass panel, followed by a hand gesture, suggesting that he opened the door toot sweet. He turned back to Marcus, who was cross-legged on the floor. "We need to open the door." Marcus looked up at him. "It's a myth, "What is?" "First do no harm. It's not what the original Hippocratic Oath says. It actually says, 'I will utterly reject harm and mischief.' I'm not caught up in any mischief, Bernard, and I've certainly never harmed anyone. I just couldn't do that." He reached under his desk and pressed a button. The door buzzed open, and the frame was filled by figures in black. "I know," said Bernard. He stepped back as a policeman and a policewoman pushed past him and hauled Marcus to his feet. "I'm so sorry." Chapter 8. Patterson looked up as Mona walked in. At last! She had finally tracked him down to a meeting room at Fettes. It was a small room with seating for only 6 people. Patterson seemed to have spread his belongings in such a way as to cover most of the table and several of the chairs. He was a grizzly bear, marking out his territory in an unfamiliar land. Despite the available seating options, he had opted to stay standing, a laptop in front of him. "I was beginning to think no one had got my text. I was on the point of giving the entire team up as lost and heading off to the cafeteria to drown my sorrows in weak Fettes coffee." "Haven't you heard from anyone else?" Mona moved Patterson's jacket so that she could lower herself into a chair at the opposite end of the table. "I have spoken to Bernard, bit of a story there, which I'll tell you later. But he didn't say if he was heading over here. Maitland's still in hospital as far as I know, and no surprise here. Carol didn't respond to the message." "Kinda glad she's not here, to be honest, Gov. Maitland's an idiot." "Very true. But I can't help feeling her attitude played a big part in him nearly getting blown up. He's got the excuse that he's still young and stupid. She might not want to be at the head, but he's got his future career to think about. If she wants to mess about, that's one thing, but she should leave him out of it." Patterson grunted. "I see why she's got a grudge, what with her boy and getting kicked in the face and everything. And understand that she's bitter. I'd be exactly the same. But this ludicrous new no-resignation diktat from Stuttle means we're all stuck with each other. And I'm just not sure I can see us working together with her in that mood. The woman's a liability." "No argument from me there, Gov." They contemplated this in silence for a moment. "Anyway, how are the computers?" "Not looking good." He spun the laptop round to show her a blank screen. "Everything's down, the entire HET system." "What about IT? Can't they do anything?" Patterson's face took on a most unusual expression, a grimace mixed with disbelief, with just a hint of sadness underpinning it all. "What?" "This is going to come as a surprise." He shook his head, as if he was still processing some unbelievable thought. "But the tall, specky one from the IT department," Marcus, "the one that has a crush on you, yes, well, he's been arrested on suspicion of being responsible for the bomb." "No!" She wondered if he'd got this wrong. Marcus? Big geeky Marcus? They must have made a mistake. "Possibly, but they did have the evidence that suggests he's involved." "But why would he do that?" "I suspect at someone else's behest. And if you're about to say, whose," she was, "don't bother, because I've no idea. But what I do know is that the box that Helen Sopel left vanished during the first bomb hoax. A bomb put paid to our server, and God knows what damage is currently being done to our IT systems. Someone's done a pretty good job of destroying what evidence we've managed to accumulate." "Why?" "I don't know. I was hoping that you might have some idea what the hell is going on. Is Carlotta Carmichael behind all this, do you think? Are we sitting on something dangerous to her interest, or maybe dangerous for other reasons, and we're all just too stupid to know what it is?" Her conversation with the professor had given her a pretty good steer on what that might be. She opened her mouth to tell the Gov about her findings, then some instinct for caution overcame her, and she clamped it shut. Could she really trust Patterson? For all his bluster and supposed hatred of authority, the Gov was very much a company man. If she told him about Bertram Fowler's information, he'd immediately want to tell Stuttle, and God knows where his actual loyalties lay, chiefly to Stuttle, she suspected. "You really think Carlotta would be up to risking the life and limb of the HET staff, Gov?" "No, but I think she'd be quite happy to delegate a task and not take too much interest in how her underlings went about fulfilling her wishes." He sat down opposite her. "Stuttle and I had a private meeting with Paul Shore, her assistant, a couple of days ago." She remembered an earlier conversation. Was Bernard at it? "No, we're hardly going to invite Bernard along." What would he do, make the tea? Nah, the daft prick walked in on us. He looked suddenly stern. I take it he's kept his mouth shut, as instructed. Absolutely, Gov. Just me putting two and two together. Anyhow, sure says she's been in a terrible state these past few days. Thinks she's not coping with the workload, and these civil servant deaths are just the last straw. He seemed to think that whatever is going on, she's not in control of it anymore. I think she might have started something that she is now regretting. Although Shore was totally adamant that he knew nothing about her or why the bomb hoaxes happened, and if he knows what or who might be behind it, he's not sharing. The thing is, Gov, the actual evidence might have gone, but we all know what was in the box. He grimaced. Maybe that means that we're next in line for eradication. Comforting thought. Oh God, Gov, it's difficult to know who to talk to about this. I mean, if Marcus, the most boring man in the world, can turn out to be some kind of virus terrorist, then there really is no one we can safely trust. I know. Mona, he paused. This friend of yours, Cassandra Doom. Christ's sake, Gov. She felt her earlier fury surging back. She's not a friend. I met her on a dating site where she was calling herself Elaine. I didn't realise who she was until I'd had dinner with her. So, it's not you that's been leaking all the stuff. Of course not. She slumped back in her chair and wondered how the trust between them had disappeared so completely. I never seriously thought that it was... Really, I thought I was a security risk. He sighed. Okay, I had a temporary moment of insanity, but like you said, things have gone crazy. If the man who fixes my computer while chuntering on about science fiction is suddenly a terrorist... I suppose. So, for the record, no, I have not leaked a single thing to Cassandra Doom, but... She paused as a thought hit her. Bernard found a listening device in his home phone, and his office phone. I wonder if Marcus was responsible. You found a listening device in the office, and you didn't think to mention it to me. Trust is a two-way thing, Gov. It's my bloody office. I had a right to... never mind. We don't have time for this. Just promise me you'll keep me in the loop from now on. OK, Gov. So, Marcus has been monitoring our emails and phone calls. Suddenly it all becomes clear. Hello? Bernard was standing in the doorway with the expression of a man who had just had his world turned upside down. How are you doing? Patterson pulled out a chair for him. Marcus, I know, Bernard, it's difficult to take in, said Mona. He didn't do it. See sense, said Patterson. His phone was used to make the hoax call. That's a bit stupid, said Mona. Exactly, Bernard nodded enthusiastically. You'd have to be incredibly stupid to use your own mobile to commit a crime, and Marcus is far from dumb. In fact, he's hyper-intelligent and extremely IT literate. He would know how easy it would be to trace the call. Patterson's face had borrowed Bernard's earlier expression. You think someone set him up? Yes, said Bernard, and I know who. It was Bryce. Mona looked at Patterson to see if he knew who this was. The other IT guy. Bernard looked exasperated. The one that never says anything. Him? Mona tried to get a mental picture of what Bryce looked like. She had a vague feeling of dark hair, a beard perhaps. But why? I don't know why, but I do know it's him. The past few days he's been telling me things about Marcus that aren't true, like he's addicted to online gambling. Is he addicted? Because that could explain... No, it's all lies. Bryce disappeared off somewhere yesterday and hasn't come back. I couldn't get the police to take me seriously when I was trying to explain. Mona could see their point. Bernard was in a heightened emotional state and, frankly, sounding like a bit of a lunatic. And now Marcus is in prison. Bernard threw himself into the chair. He won't be in prison yet, said Patterson. He'll be in a room in Fetus somewhere getting a stern talking to. Yes, Bernard snapped, and he's exactly the kind of person who would confess to something he didn't do under duress, or crack an inappropriate joke to make things 10 times worse. The look on the Gov's face suggested that he agreed with Bernard on this one. Leave it with me. I'll talk to Stuttle, see if we can find out more about this Bryce character before Marcus confesses to every unsolved crime CID has on their books. In the meantime, you two need to get Helen Sopel found and see if she can shed any light on what's going on. Take this. Bernard pulled out what looked to be a large hanky. He peeled back the four corners of it to reveal a mobile phone. Annika's. PIN code is 2309. I haven't had time to look at the messages. And now, I need to go. Go, said Patterson. Where are you off to? I need you here. I've arranged an meeting with the woman who works at the Plague Museum. See if I can get some more information from her. Should take an hour tops. Then I'll be straight home to see if I can find out anything else. I'll have access to the internet at home, unlike here, unless someone's blown up my flat while I was out. I'm sure your flat is fine. Okay, see you tomorrow. Patterson was placated. But early, mind. Bye, Bernard, Mona said absent-mindedly, her focus now entirely on the phone. She heard Bernard speaking to someone as he left and looked up to see Ian entering the room. Without a hesitation, she thrust the phone into her pocket. Rather an exciting day, said Ian. Glad we could offer you some hospitality here until your building gets the all clear. Getting more exciting by the minute, said Patterson. One of the IT guys has just been arrested on suspicion of placing the bomb. Arrested? Really? Ian's face showed no emotion, but Mona felt that there was some feeling that he was struggling to conceal. Was he incredibly shocked by this news? Or not surprised at all? Yeah, Bernard's pretty upset. He's good friends with Marcus. Marcus? Again, that look on Ian's face that Mona couldn't quite place. Yeah, shocker, isn't it? Remind me which one he is? The tall one with the ponytail and the little round glasses. Do you know who the arresting officer is? No idea. Stuttle phoned me and said he was sending a couple of plods down to arrest him. Ian considered this for a moment. I'll go and see what I can find out. I'll come with you, said Patterson. I'm not getting anywhere with the IT system. Mona saw a slight hint of irritation cross Ian's face. The computer system is humped, Patterson continued, shutting down his laptop and unplugging the charger. Shall we knock it on the head, Mona? Come in fresh tomorrow. Good idea, Gov. She was grateful for the suggestion, wanting to get the phone out of Ian's grasp. Later, Ian. He didn't respond. Chapter 9. Lucy was already at the cafe when he arrived. He took a deep breath and tried to calm his fluttering stomach. He was far more flustered than he'd hoped he would be, and much less well-groomed. His initial plans for the evening had been to leave work relatively early, go home, shower, and prepare 2 to 3 non-work topics of conversation that he could use. Instead, he had run straight from his work to catch a bus, and was now a slightly sweaty, nervous wreck. Most of the bus journey had been spent debating with himself whether he should call the whole thing off. As he had climbed the stairs in search of a free double seat, he was convinced he should cancel. He really should, and devote his time to trying to help Marcus. By the time the bus had hit Princess Street, he was swinging the other way, because, after all, what could he usefully do? March into Fetta's and tell him that they had to let Marcus go and start looking for Bryce instead? Because he had tried that earlier without any success whatsoever. He could, of course, spend all evening on the internet trying to look for clues. But if he was honest, if he didn't turn up some useful information by Googling Bryce's name, he wasn't really sure what to do. He usually relied upon Marcus for any complicated navigation of the World Wide Web. By the time the bus pulled up at his disembarking point, he decided to meet Lucy, keep it as business-like as possible, and be out of there within the hour. Lucy had bagged a nice corner location, a discreet distance from the other diners. A candle was flickering away on the table, lighting up her face as she turned to smile and wave at him. All in all, the date could not be getting off to a more romantic start, except that Lucy didn't know it was a date, and now he was going to have a very embarrassing conversation to bring her up to speed on the nature of his thought processes about the evening. He resolved to get it over sooner rather than later. Hello, Bernard. I hope you don't mind, but when I saw this seat was free, I just grabbed it. I thought it was the best one for a, she lowered her voice, private conversation. Yes, about this evening. Would you like some menus? A waiter appeared at their side, proffering 2 wooden clipboards with a list of dishes attached to them. "Oh, lovely." Lucy immediately began scanning the options. "So, about tonight. Wine list?" The 3rd wooden clipboard appeared between the 2 of them. No thank you," said Bernard. "It's a working dinner," said Lucy brightly, by way of explanation. Bernard gave up. This was not going to be a date. He should never have imagined Lucy wanted to come on a date with him. They were going to spend an hour talking about work. They'd go their separate ways, and he was going to die alone, without even Marcus for company, who would be doing a 30-year stretch for crimes he didn't commit. "I'll have the lentil lasagna and a Coke, please." He handed back his menu. At least he was going to be fed. "The polenta for me and a mineral water." She handed the wooden board over, shooting the waiter one of her lovely smiles. Somewhere deep within Bernard, a green-eyed monster awoke. He'd like one of those looks. "I expect you work round the clock at the Het. You must have working dinners all the time." Not exactly. Never, to be precise. "Anyway, how long have you worked at the museum?" "Oh, just a couple of years. I did the M. Lytton Museum and Gallery Studies at St Andrews, then got an internship at the museum, which turned into a proper job. Yay!" She made a little air-punching gesture. "Of course, when I started it was quite a sleepy little museum. Then the virus hit and suddenly we're hugely popular. And you? How long have you been at the Het?" 9 months. Before that I was a professional badminton player. Then I retrained as a health promotion specialist, a little-known profession. Then the virus hit and suddenly we're hugely popular." They both laughed. If this had been a date, it would actually have been going quite well. He thought about raising the issue, but didn't want to jinx the magic. The waiter appeared and placed their drinks on the table. "Anyway," said Lucy, suddenly businesslike, "fun as this is," she was having fun. "I don't want to keep you because I know you're super busy. What was it you wanted to know about the museum?" He kicked himself. If this wasn't a date, of course she expected him to actually have a meaningful question to ask her. And, with a guilty start, he remembered that he needed to get back and do something about Marcus. Something, still not sure what. "It was about, an issue to do with your green card machine." To his surprise, she nodded enthusiastically, the candle shadows dancing around her face as it bobbed up and down. "I'm so glad you brought that up. I was going to say something, but Karina said it was just trivia, and I shouldn't bother you with it." "I'm really interested to hear whatever you have to say," he said, sincerely. "Okay, and I really hope this is of some use, because every time I think about poor Nathan, it just makes me want to weep. But anyway, the thing that I think is odd is that on the night he was in the building, no one was there." "No one from the museum? We know that." Possibly this wasn't going to be as interesting as he'd hoped. Although, now that I come to think about it, how did he get in? "I'm not sure. We sometimes give out the keys, but only to registered key holders, who tend to be long-term volunteers with us. But that wasn't what I meant. No one was there." "We know that. He was the only person in the building." He didn't want to ruin the atmosphere, but the conversation was taking a circular turn. Lucy put down her glass. "I'm really not making this clear. Let me start at the beginning. The green card box, as you know, records everyone in and out of the main door. On the evening in question, no one was recorded as entering the building, not even Nathan." He frowned as he tried to work out how this could be. It was impossible to get past a green card box. They were generally wired into the door mechanism. If someone didn't get the all clear, for example, because the Het was looking for them, the door just wouldn't open. Most systems allowed for a manual overwrite to allow the door to be opened in an emergency. But you couldn't erase the fact that a card had already been used because the data was transmitted in real time. In fact, the green card boxes were an extremely effective method of monitoring who had been where, and were either a huge infringement on individual privacy or vastly useful in tackling crime, depending on your point of view. It might be that the boxes were susceptible to hacking. Could Bryce have used his skills in this area? But if so, why? Lucy mistook his thought processes for disbelief. "It's true. You can check the machine logs. Karina was the last person out of the building at 6:30. And there's nothing else recorded until Karina comes back in the next morning, when she found, Nathan's body. I do believe you, Lucy, and it is a very interesting point, he reassured her. He played absent-mindedly with the remaining bit of lasagna, moving his fork round and round the lentils. But the question now is, how on earth did he get in? I can't work that out. We have 2 fire doors, one on the ground floor and one which exits onto the roof, but I checked and neither of the alarms went off. He considered the other available options. A window, then. It's not that easy to open our windows. On the floors where we have exhibits, the ground first and second, we operate a climate-controlled environment to protect some of our more delicate artifacts. There's a constant log of the temperature across the building. If the window was opened, we'd know about it. Did you check the temperature logs? Yes, and I'm 90% sure nobody opened a window on any of the exhibit floors. And, to add to that, the windows are all locked. And even if somehow you had a set of keys, if you came in after hours, you would set off the burglar alarm, and you would be captured on CCTV. Could someone have let him in? There would still be the same problems of showing up on the green card box or on CCTV. Aside from the issue of who would let him in. Karina McFarlane seemed the obvious candidate to him. She'd obviously been very unhappy about their investigation, missing a meeting, and then trying to get rid of them as quickly as possible. There is no way that she couldn't think that the issues Lucy was raising were important. It was crucial, and he was amazed that none of the police who had attended the scene had followed it up. But then the police had been very quick to decide that Nathan McVie's death had been suicide. He wasn't aware that any other possibility had been considered. Was Karina part of the cover-up, or scared for her safety? Either way, he'd suggest to Mona that they paid her another visit, first thing tomorrow morning. Do you have any thoughts at all about how he might have got in, Lucy? Well, it seems to me the only remaining possibility is that someone got in via a window on the 3rd floor. They're all skylights, though, so it wouldn't be easy. But the burglar alarm and the CCTV. There isn't any CCTV up there. There's nothing of value, just a meeting room and some storage. But whichever way I look at it, I don't understand why the burglar alarm didn't go off. Could Karina... The waiter chose that moment to reappear. Everything all right with your meal? He asked, sweeping up the empty dishes. Lovely. Can we have the bill, please? As soon as the waiter was out of earshot, Bernard put the question again. Could it have been Karina that Nathan was meeting with? She could have left the alarm off when she left for the night. Then they both could have got back in. I suppose so. But why? I don't know. But I think we've overlooked a possibility about Nathan's death. Everyone assumed suicide. In fact, I think some of my colleagues were very keen on that being what happened. But we never considered whether he might actually have fallen. Could he have been trying to get out? There's a huge skylight that lights up the stairwell. He could have been reaching for that. But why would he not just have gone back the way he came? Bernard closed his eyes for a second, trying to picture the scene. He recognised the description of the large skylight at the very top of the building, but as a mere museum visitor, he'd never been above the 2nd floor. Lucy, please say if this puts you in an awkward position, but I'd really like to have a look at the 3rd floor. Do you want to come in first thing tomorrow? Tell me if this is crazy, but is there any chance we could go now? She looked at him a little uncertainly. Karina might be annoyed. I'll take full responsibility. It could really help our case. She reached into her bag and pulled out a cluster of keys on a chain. Well then, let's go. Wait, Bernard reached for the keys. They were attached to a keyring, which featured a small replica of a black and white face mask, its mouth distorted to the side. Your keyring? Oh yes, that is interesting. It's a copy of a Bangu mask. It represents a hunter who's been stricken with disease. It's very rare to see an African mask that actually depicts illness. Usually they are African. Bernard interrupted her. Not Native American? No, she looked surprised. We're working on an exhibition next year about African responses to pandemic. Ebola, of course, was devastating for several African countries. Karina has been back and forth there over the past few months. He stared into space, wondering where Africa fitted into Helen Sopel's disappearance. Had she been drawing their attention to the museum's exhibition? It was too much of a coincidence that the civil servants were meeting there, but he couldn't piece it all together. Maybe Mona would. Bernard, Lucy's voice interrupted his thoughts. Do you still want to go to the museum? Yes, sorry. He got to his feet. We should hurry. Chapter 10. Mona put her key into the lock and gently turned it. Pushing it open slowly, she peered into the dark of the hallway, trying to establish if there were any signs of life. Her initial assessment was that the coast was clear, and with her back against the wall, she slowly and silently made her way up the stairs. Mona, you're home. I didn't hear you come in. So close. Hi, Mom. I'm making steak and kidney pie for tea, but it won't be ready for an hour or so. Would you like a cup of tea to keep you going? No, I'm fine. I just need to get a bit of work done before I eat. Oh, well, I'll see you then. She sensed her mother's disappointment. It couldn't be easy, stuck in the house by herself all day. Mona was probably the first person she'd spoken to today. She hesitated. It wouldn't kill her to go and get that cup of tea, have a quick chat before she looked at Helen Sopel's text messages. On the other hand, she could just have a quick look at the mobile, check out if there was anything urgent on it, then head downstairs. She ran up the remaining stairs. Sitting cross-legged on the single divan in her childhood bedroom, she turned on the phone and waited as a number of texts downloaded. She scrolled through the list of recent calls. As Simon had indicated, there was one number that had suddenly started appearing over the weekend and had been calling and been called repeatedly over the last few days. She jotted down the number, then flicked over to the text messages. There were very few from the number she was looking for, but then Simon had talked about numerous furtive phone calls. Perhaps Helen and Annika preferred to talk rather than text. The 6 messages she could see revealed very little. In fact, unless they were in code, she was pretty sure that they were shopping lists. Cheese, bread, deodorant, Diet Coke, 2 bottles. You wouldn't have to be a master of deduction to take from this that Helen was hiding out, probably somewhere not very far away, and Annika was keeping her supplied. She picked up her own phone and dialed Patterson's number. It went straight to voicemail. She checked the time and realised that she was in the middle of the couple of hours during which Patterson's wife insisted that he didn't answer his phone. The second Mrs. Patterson had very particular ideas about how engaged the Gov should be in the nightly ritual of tea, bath, and toothbrushing for his young kids. As often as not, the Gov broke this particular rule, but it would appear that tonight he was behaving himself. Gov, we need to bring Annika Thomas, Helen Sopel's assistant, in for questioning, ideally tonight. I think she knows where Helen is. Call me when you get this. Mona rearranged the pillows on her bed, trying to make herself comfortable while she went over the options in her head. Annika would have realised it was missing by now, but they had no way of knowing whether she would have managed to alert Helen to that fact. If she had, there wouldn't be any further calls to it, and knowing that they had been found out, there was every chance that Helen might decide it wasn't safe for her to stay where she was. If she didn't yet know, they had a tiny window for action before Helen realised she hadn't heard from Annika for a while. Usually, in this situation, she'd have given Marcus the number in the hope that Helen would continue to use it, and they would be able to trace her location. But Marcus and Bryce were out of the picture, and she didn't know who else to ask. All this would be so much easier if she could actually speak to Patterson. She scrolled through her phone's address book and looked for his home phone number. When she'd added this to the address book against the entry, she typed home number only for emergencies to make sure that she didn't accidentally ring it and get a bollocking. She might well still get into trouble, but nobody could deny she needed his help immediately. Patterson would know what to do. She dialed the number, steeled herself to explain to Mrs. Patterson that she was phoning from work, and felt an increasing sense of anticlimax as the phone rang and rang. She groaned in frustration, laying the two phones side by side on the bed. She wondered what to do. Not only was she losing valuable time in catching Helen, in the meantime, she had the thorny problem of what to do with the phone. It should be securely held under lock and key, but where exactly was safe these days? Somewhere in Fettes, where Ian would know about it. Hand it over to Stuttle for safekeeping? Neither option appealed. There was also the issue that if Annika had enabled her track my phone option, she might even now be sitting looking at the details of where her phone had last been switched on. Given what she'd been using the phone for, she needed a brass neck of no mean order to actually turn up and demand it back. But considering Simon's description of working with her and her own experience of meeting her, it couldn't be ruled out. There was also the possibility she might not come alone. She could be sitting outside her house at this very minute, in a car with the lights off and someone large and menacing in the passenger seat. She looked over at her window. This was Bernard-level paranoia. Or was it? The high death count to date on this investigation suggested that some degree of caution should be followed. She leapt off the bed and switched off her light. Peering cautiously from behind her curtain, she scanned up and down the road and could see nothing out of the ordinary. She heaved a sigh of relief and, feeling slightly sheepish, let the curtain fall into place. Her safest bet was to switch off the phone and keep it on her person, at least until the Gov came up with a better idea. At that very moment, her phone started ringing. The Gov must finally have wriggled free of his domestic duties. She snatched up her phone, but it wasn't making a sound. On her bed, Helen's phone was lit up. She leaned over, trying not to touch it in case she accidentally answered it. The number was the one that she'd hoped to see. It looked like Helen didn't know that the phone had been stolen, which was interesting. Annika should have been round there as soon as she noticed it was missing. Was there some reason Annika had been detained? She was tempted to answer it, but had no clear plan of what she would say. This was so frustrating. Marcus would have had the whole thing sorted by now. The ringing stopped, and a few seconds later the phone binged to indicate a text message had arrived. Very, very carefully, Mona pressed the button to read it. Setting off now, museum meeting at 8, and if not in touch by 9:30, you know what to do. She considered this message for a moment, her mind working overtime. She reached for her own mobile and pressed Bernard's number. "Bernard, are you still with that woman from the museum?" Yes. Hang on." She heard him murmuring apologies, no doubt to the woman in question. He was probably moving himself to a discreet distance before continuing the conversation. "Great, I need you to ask her if she can let me in there tonight." "Ah, right. Funny you should say that. I've just asked her the same thing." "You want access to the museum? Why? Actually, tell me when I see you. Where are you?" She noted the name of the restaurant and ran down the stairs, pulling her coat on as she went. "Mum!" Her mother limped slowly out of the kitchen. "What is it?" "I'm so sorry to do this, but I need to go out." She looked horrified. "But what about your tea?" "I'm sorry, but it's an emergency." Any guilt she felt was being entirely swamped by adrenaline. Her mother turned back to her cooking. "It always is."
End of CD 7. CD 8.
Chapter 11. Bernard hoped that Mona would find the cafe okay. He had discussed its merits with her once before, while stuck in a car waiting for a health defaulter to show. He'd sung its praises, noting the many awards it had won, but she'd claimed never to have heard of it, because all-vegetarian menus never appealed to her. He could believe that. As a former health promotion specialist, he'd been able to point out to her the many shortcomings of her diet, which from what he could see consisted largely of coffee, Diet Coke, packets of crisps, and the occasional takeaway curry when she finally remembered to eat. Maybe when all this was over, they could both come here to celebrate. assuming they were both still alive. Here she was now, standing in the middle of the room, scanning the tables. He waved. "That's my colleague here now." Lucy swivelled round. "Oh, she looks nice." Mona gestured him over with a manner that was less suggestive of niceness than of extreme impatience. "Back in a mo." He hurried over. Mona looked at the tables surrounding them and appeared to decide that it wasn't private enough, shoving him less than gently toward a quieter area near the door. "Right, don't talk, just listen. I spoke to Professor Bertram Fowler, and he told me what Helen and the other civil servants were up to." "How did he—" "No talking, just listening." He nodded. "They were running an illegal drugs trial in Africa using street children. Several of them died after taking the drugs, and Jasper Connington had a fit of conscience and told the professor. He was preparing to denounce the trials in Parliament when he had his heart attack." He stared at her. "I'm finished now, Bernard. You can say, 'That's terrible.'" "That is terrible. And Helen was caught up in all this." "It appears so, and I got a message on her mobile saying she's coming to a meeting at the museum at 8 p.m. tonight. She pointed in Lucy's direction. "Your friend from the museum. Can we trust her?" "She's not my friend. I only met her as part of the investigation." He followed Mona's gaze. Lucy was shrouded in candlelight again. "I don't know if we can trust her, given that one of our IT support workers seems to have been an undercover terrorist. I'm struggling with trying to trust anyone." Lucy reached up and curled a stray lock of hair behind her ear. She'd never looked prettier. He sighed. "But I really hope we can." Mona elbowed him gently. "Bernard, is this a date?" "No." He did his best to sound annoyed, before his natural honesty reasserted itself. "Well, maybe." "Bernard, if you're about to say the word badass, I will not be responsible for my actions." "Okay," she smiled. "Let's go to the museum." "What are all these plants doing here?" Mona pushed angrily past the row of tubs in her way. Oh, never mind." Bernard suspected that she wouldn't welcome a full explanation of the medicinal properties of the foliage. Maybe later, when she wasn't looking quite so, what was the word? Focused. "Lucy," Mona suddenly spun round to talk to her, making her jump a little bit. "Once we're in the building, will it be obvious to anyone else that we're there? I mean, if they were also to come here tonight." "Well, I suppose they would know if the alarm wasn't on, but why would anyone else be here tonight? Do you mean Karina?" She turned her key and pushed open the door, then paused with the key still in the lock. "Oh, the alarm isn't on." "Does that mean someone is already here?" asked Bernard. "I don't think so. The lights aren't on." "I don't understand. Maybe Karina forgot to put it on when she left. Or maybe she's planning to come back later tonight via another route," Bernard explained to Mona about his earlier discussions with Lucy. "I don't really understand what's going on here." Lucy was starting to look worried. "I don't want to get into any trouble." "You're assisting with a health defaulter inquiry. You can blame us for any actions we've requested that you take," said Mona. She didn't look convinced by this. Bernard thought she was right to be concerned. He tried another angle. "Your assistance tonight might help us to find out what actually happened to Nathan McVie." This seemed to do the trick. Poor Nathan. "So, Lucy, we think there's going to be a meeting here tonight between Helen Sopel," said Mona. "The missing civil servant?" "Yes," said Mona, "and someone else." "Possibly Karina," added Bernard. "Seems likely, seeing as she left the alarm off." "I don't understand where she fits into all this, but yes, possibly." Mona looked thoughtful. "I suspect someone else as well." "Carlotta Carmichael? My money would be on Jonathan." She turned her attention back to Lucy. "If they were coming in via the roof, which meeting room do you think they would use?" "If they were wanting to avoid the CCTV, they'd probably stick to the 3rd floor. There's a meeting room there." She pulled a face. "Although it's not very comfortable." "If I wanted to listen to the conversation in the meeting room, is there somewhere I could hide?" asked Mona. "I'm not sure. Shall we go and look?" She started up the stairs. Hang on just a minute, Lucy." He pulled Mona to one side, speaking quietly in the hope that Lucy wouldn't hear them. "What are you doing? All we need to do is find Helen and take her to her health check. We don't need to know about what's happening at the meeting." "You don't want to know what's actually going on?" "Of course I do, but it's nothing to do with us. It's the responsibility of... Well, I don't know exactly, but it's not our remit." She had the particular look of irritation on her face that he recognised from previous arguments. It was the expression she always wore when she was annoyed with him, but didn't actually have an answer to his question. He could see her thought processes at work, and, after a second, a look of triumph came over her face. "I need to scope the situation out, Bernard. She may not come willingly, and we don't know how many of them will be at the meeting. It makes sense to check out what we're dealing with. I can be in there and let you know how many of them there are, and if you need to call for backup." "Yes, but..." He suspected any such call would be made after Mona had satisfied her curiosity about the content of the meeting. "Bernard, we don't even know if the people at the meeting will be armed." "Armed? It's a meeting between a civil servant and a museum curator. There's as much chance they're packing heat as I am." "Packing heat? Bernard, you watch too many films." She started up the stairs. "Mona, don't get yourself killed or sacked trying to help the professor." "That's not what this is about, Bernard." "Really? This isn't about you having misplaced feelings of guilt about his heart attack, and you wanting to finish the work that he started?" "No, it's not." Her look of irritation was back. "Anyway, they can't sack us. Recruitment being what it is, they'd never replace us. Let's pick up the pace." As instructed, Bernard ran up the stairs behind Mona, taking them two at a time in his haste. As he reached the second floor, he realised that Lucy was no longer with them, and peered over the banister. She was walking up quite slowly, her hand on her side as if she had a stitch. He stopped to let her catch up. "I'm not as fit as you and your colleague are, Bernard. All that food then rushing around. I think I need to sit down for a minute. Come on, we're nearly there." He hesitated for a second, then took her arm. "You can lean on me." "Thank you." Mona's head appeared above them. "Come on, we're running out of time." Lucy groaned, but let Bernard hurry her along. Once they reached the third-floor landing, she stopped suddenly. "There!" She pulled away from him and patted something on the wall. "What?" "It's not there," she panted. She hit the wall again, and he saw that she was actually tapping a metal bracket. It had a couple of curved arms sticking out from it, which looked as if they should be holding something in place. "There should be a wooden pole there with a hook on the end of it. We use it to open the skylight if it gets too hot in the entrance hall. If poor Nathan was trying to use that to get out of the building." Bernard looked at the skylight. To access it, Nathan would have to have hooked it open, then climbed over the banister and somehow levered himself out of the window. It was possible, but... He looked down to the ground floor below, a pretty terrifying route to take. What would Nathan have been so worried about that he would have risked his life to escape in this way? It still doesn't explain why he didn't go back out the way he came in. Mona joined them. "Come on, guys. These discussions will have to wait." She looked at the window above them. "Please tell me that's not the way into the building you were thinking about." "No." Lucy shook her head. "There are a couple of skylights in our storage area, I think. To be honest, I'm not up here all that much." "What's the nearest one to the meeting room?" "Over there." Bernard walked to the door Lucy was pointing at and opened it. There was a small set of wooden steps just below the skylight. He went in, leaving the light off, and climbed up to the window. He pushed it gently and found it wasn't locked. Cautiously, he stuck his head out and saw that there was a flat roof only a few feet below them. "Mona, this looks like their way in." She looked into the room. "Looks like it. Now can you get Lucy somewhere safe, then give Patterson a ring, see if he can get us any backup." She turned to go, then stopped. "But just tell him that we think we found Helen Sopel. Don't mention..." She caught sight of Lucy listening in. "The other stuff I told you at the restaurant." He thought about asking why, but decided there wasn't time. "Okay, Mona, are you sure about this?" She shooed them in the direction of the door. "Totally." Chapter 12. Lucy was right about the third-floor meeting room. It was not in any way, shape or form comfortable. The climate control of the museum obviously didn't extend this far, unless the climate they were aiming for was polar ice cap. The meeting room had a small adjoining space, a large cupboard really, which seemed to be used to store paper records back to the day the museum was founded, or possibly back to the day paper was invented, judging by the age of some of it. Mona could not have hoped for a more perfect spot for eavesdropping. She crouched in the dark and hoped that her shivering didn't give her away. How should she play this? Helen probably wasn't going to be cooperative. Between Bernard and herself, they could strong-arm her into a taxi and to the nearest emergency health check. They'd done it a stack of times before, usually with a health defaulter under the influence. She'd managed to get Bernard trained to the point where he didn't take several large steps backwards whenever the punches started flying, and he could usually be relied upon to hold someone's arms effectively behind their back and duck at the appropriate moment. But that worked when they had a single person to deal with, and who knew how this Karina woman was going to react? Maybe she'd leap to Helen's defence. Maybe there were other people attending the meeting who wouldn't be keen to see Helen carted off to a health check. And there was the question of how Helen herself would react. Most of the reluctant defaulters she'd hauled in were unwilling to cooperate because they were drunk, or worried about missing their next fix. Judging by Nathan McVee's willingness to risk his life to get out of the building, Helen was potentially highly motivated to stay out of the reach of the authorities. She heard a crash, followed by several bangs. It looked like the party was about to begin. Adrenaline surged through her, and without consciously thinking about it, her hands formed into fists. The sound of female voices drifted through to her. "So, how are you? How am I? How do you think I am? I'm in hiding. My job's on the line and I'm in danger of taking the blame for this whole fiasco. I'm just dandy, I really am. Just trying to keep this civilised, Helen. Helen. Tick. Civilised is a bit late for that. Anyway, what time is Jonathan getting here? Jonathan. Tick. Soon, although he's not happy with the stunt that you pulled, passing the bills on to the het officers with his phone number on it. Put him and Carlotta in a very difficult position. My heart is breaking for them, Karina. Karina. Final tick. Still, I'm sure Jonathan will have a plan. After all, that's what he does, isn't it? Sorts out the messes that his wife has created. There was the sound of a chair being scraped back. I really don't care about Jonathan Carmichael's problems. All I want is my passport back, then I'm out of his hair. He's going to want to know what other little self-protection measures you've put in place. Who else will be running to the authorities? Your pal got some more information? What about your sister? Or that assistant of yours? Annika. All the suspects present and correct. Leave them out of this, Helen said. Nobody will say anything, assuming nothing happens to me. I'm going to take 6 months unpaid leave somewhere far away from here until all this heat from Nathan and Jasper's deaths dies down. And what then? You're just going to turn up and reclaim your job? Why not? I haven't done anything wrong. We were participants in a legitimate project. One which Carlotta Carmichael knew nothing about. Knew nothing about. Her husband was... Oh, never mind. I keep forgetting that the only thing you care about in life is this museum. After all, you got your friend killed because of it. Nathan's death was nothing to do with me. Karina's voice rose sharply. Really? Let's just remind ourselves of your role in all this. You provide us with a meeting space here in your lovely museum at the request of Nathan, your friend. Remember him? In return, you get a nice fat bung to organise an exhibition about Ebola and all the other infectious diseases you can get in Africa. And we get a cover story if anyone asks about this fantastic intercontinental cooperative show that we're putting on. That's not how I... Helen talked right over her. But nobody does ask, do they? And our little experiment continues on, killing children as it goes. Not that anyone is going to miss them, except maybe their pals on the street or in the orphanage. Shut up! Nobody notices and nobody cares. And that's just the way it would have stayed if the research hadn't started looking just a little bit promising. This was news. In her excitement, Mona brushed against a tower of papers. She bit her lip, but fortunately nothing moved. She concentrated on staying as still as possible. Enough progress for the trials to continue as a legitimate partnership between the Scottish Government, a couple of our research institutes and the University of Lowawi. Here it's got ethics committee approval and everything. Apparently the antivirals are looking really promising. Could be big money in it. Mona was beginning to understand Helen's sudden disappearance. The government might have been willing to take the heat if the existence of an unsuccessful and morally reprehensible drugs trial had leaked into the public domain. Heads would have had to roll. Carlotta's probably amongst them. Helen would be facing criminal charges. There have been some public soul-searching about the limits of what should be done to fight the virus. And in 6 months, the whole scandal would be forgotten. But an actually promising antiviral drug trial. No one would want to risk a proper study being undermined by its unethical start. Helen Sopel, as the remaining person able to let the cat out of the bag, was in a delicate position. So, Friday morning you give us the use of your beautiful building once more, don't you? So that Carlotta Carmichael can update us with the good news about the future of the project. And, of course, the bad news for any of us people who know the real truth about how the research really got started. We're immediately dropped from the project and banned from discussing it, even with each other. Well, I wouldn't know, would I? Karina sounded defensive. I wasn't at the meeting. Yes, Karina, but by then your involvement in this had stopped being a favour that you were doing for Nathan. It took me a while, but I figured it out. By the time of that last meeting, you were totally in the pocket of that awful man. Mona's ears pricked up even further. Yes, that delightful man. I'd describe him as our minder, but you probably see him more as a benefactor of the arts. Fuck you. What did he offer you, Karina? A fully funded exhibition every year for the next 10 years, and all you had to do in return was offer up Nathan. Mona waited for a rebuttal, but there was silence. Because Carlotta was nervous, wasn't she? Could she rely on us all not to run to the press, or even worse, that mad old professor? She was really paranoid about him. So we all get a text message. Mine supposedly came from Jasper, although I dare say his supposedly came from me, suggesting a meeting here Friday evening, so we can discuss what happened. Top secret, of course. Enter via the tradesman's entrance so no one knows we've been here. You are so full of, except only poor Nathan turned up. You must have known what would happen when you handed him over to that man. I didn't hand. What were your instructions? Welcome them in. Give them a nice cup of that special tea that'll make them all nice and sleepy and malleable. And let that man, she spat out the words, take care of it. Again, silence filled the pause. And my guess is that Nathan twigged what was happening. Did he beg you for help, Karina? Because he must have been pretty bloody desperate to trying to climb out of that window. There was a large sniff, followed by the sound of tears, which led Mona to believe that Helen's version of events had been pretty close to the truth. Where is Jonathan? Jonathan's not coming. He's not bringing you your passport. Karina's tears had turned to anger. Did you really think that he wanted it so he could get you a visa for that visit to Africa? Didn't you wonder why it never quite happened? He's been sitting on it all this time, just in case things got awkward. There was a banging sound, which Mona recognised as the sound of the window opening. I wouldn't run off if I were you. There's someone else here to see you. Further thumps followed as the unknown person joined the fray. Hello, Helen. What an interesting discussion you ladies have been having. Anyway, I thought it was time for the awful man himself to join the conversation. Mona heard the familiar tones of Ian Jacobson. Chapter 13. Where should we wait? Asked Lucy. Somewhere out of the way where we can't be seen, but near enough that I can hear Mona if she shouts for help. He looked back at the door behind which his colleague was hidden. He didn't like this. He'd have been happier if all they were doing was waiting for Helen Sopel to appear through the window, then requesting her immediate appearance at a health check. Though he had to admit, she had a point that they didn't actually know who else might be there. He'd be even happier once he'd phoned Patterson and made all this his problem. My office is 1 floor down. Would that do? Sounds good. He took her arm again. We'd better hurry. Lucy's office was small, with most of the floor space taken up by a large wooden antique desk. It was impossible to open the door fully. Bernard squeezed through the space and surveyed the room. Every available surface seemed to be covered either by papers or by books. She fussed around, rearranging enough stuff to allow him to sit down. He pulled out his mobile and pressed his boss's number. Patterson. It's Bernard. I know, the phone told me. What's up? He wondered where to begin. Right, okay. Thing is, something approaching a growl emanated from the phone. Cut to the chase, Bernard. We're at the museum. We think Helen Sopel will be meeting someone here, but we don't know who. Excellent work. Give me a ring back after she's had her health check. He panicked that Patterson was about to hang up. Wait. The thing is, Mr. Patterson, Mona was wondering if you could send some backup. There was a loud snort. I'd love to, Bernard. But who? Maitland's still in hospital. Carol is worse than useless. And unless you're both staring down the business end of a submachine gun, there's a limited chance of me being able to get any local plod round you. The only chance would be going back to Stuttle. And I can't do that unless you're telling me it's either a matter of life and death or a matter of national security. Is it either of those things? Was it a matter of national security? He wasn't sure, and Mona had been pretty adamant that he didn't share too much with Patterson. Bernard! The phone shouted at him. Are you okay? Yeah, fine, just thinking. So, do I need to call Stuttle? No, probably not. Are you sure? Because I'm getting the impression that you and Mona aren't sending all the information you should be up the chain. In contrast to earlier, he now had a sudden urge to get Patterson off the phone. It's fine, Mr. Patterson, we'll cope. Tell you what, Bernard, I'll come. I've had a couple of beers, so I'll need to get a taxi, but I'll be there as soon as. Oh, okay, good. But the phone was already dead. He hoped Mona would be okay with this. Lucy smiled at him. Reinforcements on the way. Something like that. He gave a slightly queasy smile. The cavalry were some way off mounting their steeds and riding to the rescue. How far away is Karina's office? I seem to remember it's on this floor. It's a couple of doors down. Is there any chance of a look at it? She wrinkled her nose. Bernard sensed that they were reaching the limits of Lucy's willingness to cooperate. I don't know. Don't you need a warrant or something like that? How about I promise just to look and not take anything away? She won't even know I've been there. Well, okay, I suppose. A look of doubt still clouded her face. But if she walks in on us, I hope you can say something that stops me getting sacked. I'll think of something. He sincerely hoped Patterson would have arrived by then. He didn't care whether his boss praised his efforts or yelled at him for his approach. He just wanted someone else to come along and take charge. Bernard stuck his head out of the door and gave a cautious look around. The sound of muffled voices could be heard upstairs. Quick, and be very quiet. They scurried along the corridor. Lucy gently eased the door open and they went in. What are you looking for? She asked. Accounts. Try the filing cabinet. It's locked. I think the key is in her top drawer. I'll get it. Oh. She looked over to him. What was the name of the civil servant you were looking for? Is it Helen Sopel? Yes. She pointed to the desk. There's a document here with her name on it. It seems to be some kind of resignation letter. He walked round to her side of the desk and started to read the typewritten document. Dear, I wish to tender my resignation with immediate effect, for personal reasons. Yours sincerely, Helen Sopel, Head of Virus Operational Response Team at the Scottish Government. There was a second sheet of paper sticking out under the top layer. He pulled his jumper down over his fingers and gently eased it out. Dear Joanne, I can't do this any longer. I'm so sorry that I've caused you any worry. I'm taking some time away to think about things. I'll ring you when I'm settled. Love you. Why are these here? Asked Lucy. I don't understand why this lady would come here and write these letters. And when was she here? I don't know, but I have a horrible feeling that she didn't write them, Lucy. I think perhaps that someone else wrote them and they're hoping she signs them tonight. No! She looked nervously over her shoulder. Can we go, Bernard? I don't like this. OK. He had to admit his stomach was starting to churn a bit too. He pulled open the nearest door. That's a cupboard, not the way out, said Lucy. He didn't move, just stood staring at what he'd found. Bernard, what is it? She came over to see what he was looking at. Lucy, is that what I think it is? He pointed at a long wooden pole with a brass hook at the end of it. Oh dear. Her hand flew to her lip. Yes, that's the pole for opening the skylight. It shouldn't be here. It should be on the 3rd floor, next to where Nathan fell, if he did fall, to his death. Chapter 14. What are you doing here? Helen's voice was high-pitched and squeaking with fear. What was Ian doing there? Whatever his interest was in Helen, it didn't relate to her being late for a health check. She suspected that his interest wasn't official Police Scotland business either. She didn't know why he was here, or what he was up to, but she suspected that Helen was right about one thing. He really was an awful man. Should she reveal herself? Deep within the Het handbook, there was a protocol for how the Het and Police Scotland should work together. In an emergency situation, the procedure made it clear that Het staff were compelled to defer to their police colleagues. She couldn't help but feel that the nuances of this particular situation were not adequately covered by the handbook's rules. And she'd be damned if she was revealing herself before she found out what Ian was up to. It wasn't just idle curiosity. The more she heard of the conversation, the better she would be able to protect Helen from whatever Ian had in mind. I had a little chat with the Carmichaels and we agreed that I would take it from here. That little stunt with the phone bills didn't go down well at all. I'm sorry. There was a squeaky tone to her voice betraying her nerves. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't ask anyone to do it. My friend panicked when your lot turned up and started questioning her. Yeah, mistake or whatever doesn't make up for the fact that it did happen. And, by the way, if you're relying on Annika Thomas to raise the alarm for you, guess again. We've had her in custody since this morning. Well, fuck you. She seemed to be rallying. What was I supposed to do? Jasper had sold us out to that professor. Nathan was dead, and Carlotta wouldn't give me any reassurance that I wouldn't end up taking responsibility for the whole thing. She was talking about me being extradited to the Democratic Republic of Africa on manslaughter charges. I could end up in an African jail. Believe me, that won't happen. Ian's tone was soothing. Mona recognised the fake sincerity from her previous conversations with Ian. She knew exactly how quickly it tipped over into threats. Now, Helen, I need you to sign a couple of things for me, then we're going for a drive. I'm not going anywhere with you. You can't make me. Oh, Helen, he gave a little sarcastic laugh. You cause us so much trouble. Put it this way, you can sign the things we need and walk to the car, or I can shoot you in one of your legs and drag you there. Helen let out a small scream. Mona texted Bernard. Dial 999, man with gun. Is this really necessary? Asked Karina. We could... Shut up. So what's it going to be, Helen? The time had come. Mona carefully got to her feet and in one smooth motion yanked open the cupboard door and stepped out into the meeting room. I suggest you don't do anything. What the... Ian gawped at her, astonished. She was disappointed to see that he was actually holding a gun. She'd been hoping it was a bluff, but hell, she'd work with what she'd got. Ian's expression hardened. What are you doing here? Looking for a missing health defaulter, she smiled. Hey, Helen, good to meet you. For Christ's sake, Mona, he started to laugh. You are totally wasted in health enforcement. Why couldn't you make the same half-arsed attempt to track down defaulters as the rest of the Het staff? Just like to see things through. She started calculating her odds. Ian had a gun and an apparent ruthless streak on his side, and she had her bare hands. Bernard, one floor down, a 999 response that could take God knows how long, and two civilians with very questionable loyalties. There was the potential for someone to end up very dead in this scenario. Without moving his aim an inch, Ian reached into his pocket with his free hand and pulled out his mobile. She took a step in his direction and he motioned her back with the gun. "Bob," he spoke into his phone, "guess which lovely lady has joined the party?" Bob? It must be Bob Ellis, Ian's partner in crime, whom she'd last seen driving off with the professor, allegedly taking him to a safe house. She wasn't privy to Bob's response, but she guessed it would be something sarcastic, sweary, and with an unpleasant undercurrent of sexism. Mona White. This time, even from where she was standing, she could hear Bob's response, loud and clear. "Yeah, that bitch. Going to need some backup in case she tries to scratch me with her fingernails. You know what girls are like." Shooting her a fake smile, he popped the phone back into his pocket. "Bob says hi." "Ian, what's going on?" Karina stepped around the table to stand behind him. "Who is she?" "She's a minor irritation." Ian's eyes never moved from her face. "Which I'll deal with. Do you have the paperwork?" Karina still looked anxious. "It's in my office." "Go and get it." Mona wondered if Bernard was up to this. He wouldn't have been her first choice as backup, but he was getting better. He was better in a crisis situation than he was when he had time to stop and think about all the things that could go wrong. If he'd any sense, once he'd got her text, he'd have got himself and Lucy out of the building. With a last glance in Mona's direction, Karina disappeared from the room. "Don't let him take me." Helen's breath was coming out in short bursts. "I won't." She kept eye contact with Ian, who snorted. "If she's your only hope, Helen, you're doomed." Mona continued her calculations. How far away was Bob? Once he arrived, presumably armed, there was no chance of her stopping Helen coming to harm. She caught Ian's eye and guessed similar scheming was going through his mind. "We're not there yet, you know," said Mona. "What?" asked Ian. "We're not yet in a world where police, or whatever you actually are, can go around shooting innocent people and justify it because of virus control." "Innocent?" He shook his head, a small smile on his face. "I could find many words to describe Miss Sopel here, but innocent wouldn't be one of them." They were interrupted by Karina returning. "There's someone down there. I can hear them talking." "Yours, I presume?" Ian turned to Mona. "Is it Maitland or Bernard?" She said nothing. "It's Bernard, isn't it?" He threw his head back and laughed. "I was almost worried for a minute there. Karina, does this room lock?" "Yes." She walked over to the door and pulled a large, old-fashioned key out of the keyhole. "OK, get her locked in. The rest of us are going downstairs." "I could stay here," said Karina. "No, I'll need your help." He turned and pointed the gun directly at Mona's face. "And, bitch, don't try anything. I really will shoot you." She believed him. "Don't leave me here, Mona." Helen grabbed her arm. "Please." She gently prized her fingers off. "I'll be back. Don't worry." "Don't bank on that, Helen. You." He pointed the gun at her. "Move." They walked down the stairs in single file. Above them they could hear Helen Sopel hammering on the door and screaming Mona's name. "Karina, which room are they likely to be in?" She wasn't listening, too busy looking back up the stairs in the direction of the noise. Mona guessed that the evening was not working out the way she had hoped. Ever since Ian had started threatening to shoot people, Karina had been looking increasingly pale. She was a walking definition of out of one's depth. "Karina, focus." She jumped. "Which room will they be in?" "Oh, right, probably my assistant's. That door there." She pointed. "Bernard," he shouted, "come out here before I shoot your boss." There was a second's delay. Then Bernard appeared, with Lucy's head peering over his shoulder. "Karina," said Lucy, "what's going on?" "Just," she looked on the point of tears, "just do as he says. Please, Lucy." "Wise words." Ian turned to Karina. "Does your room lock?" "Yes, but—" "Everyone in there, please, quick as you can." Mona was embarrassed to see Bernard leading the way, disappearing into the room as fast as he could go, with little thought or concern for the others. If he had been hoping for a relationship with that woman from the museum, he could forget about it now, after this lack of chivalry. She'd spent months trying to build up his confidence so that he wasn't an embarrassment in these types of situations. Couldn't he at least have put up a token show of resistance? "Great backup you've got there, Mona," Ian sniggered. "First rate." "The police will be here any minute, you know. We've dialed 999. "I'd be delighted to see them." He looked unconcerned. "One phone call from me, and it's you lot that would end up under arrest." She tutted, her annoyance compounded by the fact that Ian was probably telling the truth. She walked as slowly as she dared in the direction of the office, desperately trying to formulate a plan of action with the limited resources she had at her disposal. With a half-willing accomplice, a Maitland for example, the two of them could surely have overpowered Ian, gun or no gun. But she didn't have a partner on this one. She had Bernard. She might as well have been on her own. "Speed it up, Mona!" With a final glare at him, she stepped into the office. Immediately she was grabbed by Lucy and pulled into a corner. Wrong-footed, she tried to work out what was happening. Bernard stepped forward, and as soon as Ian walked through the door, hit him in the face with what looked like a large wooden pole. "Ow, my nose!" Bernard brought the pole down again, this time on his arm. "Careful, Bernard!" Glad as she was to see Ian getting beaten up, she didn't want anyone killed by the gun going off by accident. Ian cried out in pain and the gun fell to the ground. Mona made a grab for it, and her fingers closed round it seconds before Ian crashed into her. Bernard gave Ian a further blow with the pole, this time on the back of the head. He fell to the ground moaning. "Fuck's sake, Bernard! Stop hitting me!" Mona pointed her newly acquired gun at Ian. "Lucy," she said, "get the keys to the meeting room and let Helen out." "Don't do this, Mona." Ian levered himself up on his good arm. "You've no idea what is going on here. Stay there." She pointed the gun at his head. Bernard and the wooden pole stood guard over Ian to stop him making a grab for her. "Can I have the keys, please?" Lucy held out her hand and Karina passed them over without a murmur. "Mona, give me my gun back." Ian had propped himself up against Karina's desk. From the way he was nursing his arm, she doubted he would actually be able to fire it. "If you give me it now, we can minimise any comeback on you or Bernard for your behaviour today." "I don't think so." "You know, I outrank you." "No, actually, I don't. I don't know who the hell you are or who you work for these days. I only know that bad things happen around you." "You don't understand what's happening here. You don't." Ian's voice tailed off. His skin had turned a strange shade of grey. After staring at them blankly for a second, he slumped forward, his head crunching off the floor as he fell. They looked at him, in a silence broken only by the sound of Karina's heels clicking as she took off down the stairs. "Should we?" asked Bernard. "No, let her go." She pointed at Ian. "Do you think he's faking it?" "I don't know. I did hit him quite hard." "Check his pulse." "He's still breathing." "That was a fucking high-risk strategy there, Bernard. What if the gun had gone off when you hit him?" He frowned. "I thought he was planning to shoot us all. It seemed like a risk worth taking. Has he gone mad or something?" "No, he's sane. Beyond that, I have no idea what's happening. Look, we need to hurry. Ian's already called for backup. I'll call an ambulance and stay with him. You need to get Helen and Lucy out of here. Go out through the skylight and let's hope they're not watching the back of the museum. Here, take the gun." "No way." He shook his head vigorously. "Sorry, Mona, but I'm not touching that thing." "Okay." It was probably for the best. The last thing they wanted was Bernard unintentionally shooting someone, probably himself. He gave her a worried little nod, then turned to leave. "Bernard?" "Yeah." "Well done." He nodded solemnly. "I'll probably be in loads of trouble for this." He ran up the stairs, and she heard him calling out to Lucy. She pulled out her mobile and dialed 999. "Ambulance, please. Het code 924. After securing the emergency response, she turned back to Ian. His breathing seemed regular. She debated putting him into the recovery position, but didn't want to get too close. What was she going to say when the police and ambulance finally arrived? And what story would Ian and Bob spin them? If Ian had been telling the truth when he said he could get her arrested, Bob would have similar powers, and seeing the state that his colleague was in, might well feel moved to use them. "Mona!" The gov's voice echoed up the stairs. Karina must have fled without taking the time to lock up behind her. She stuck her head over the banister and was horrified to see Bob right behind him. "Are you okay? Bob said there'd been a bit of trouble." And the lies and damage limitation had begun. She watched them walk up the stairs. A movement caught her eye, and she turned back just in time to see Ian lunging full tilt toward her. She stepped back and her feet went from under her. She grabbed the banister to pull herself upright, but before she could fully right herself, he was on her, grabbing her arm. To her horror, she realised he was pushing her backwards over the banister, intent on reclaiming his gun. If he kept up this pressure another minute, she would tip over and fall, but at this distance, if she fired the gun, it would be fatal. "You stupid bitch!" Blood was dripping onto her from Ian's ruined face. His eyes were wide and staring, and his teeth were bared. He looked like an animal moving in for the kill. "For God's sake, Ian!" The sound of her voice seemed to bring him back, and he released his grip slightly. He was holding her with his left hand. Bernard had obviously done some serious damage to his other arm. She tried to move, but his grip on her tightened. She had only one option left. Opening her hand, she dropped the gun. After a second, she heard it crash to the ground. She hoped it had hit the floor and not some irreplaceable artifact. "What the bloody hell is going on up there?" The Gov's voice rang out. "Jesus Christ, is that a gun?" Ian released his grip, as if he was suddenly weary. She stared at him. His nose looked like it might be broken. Blood was smeared across his face and most of his clothing. His right arm was hanging limply at his side. She really was going to have to buy Bernard a vegetarian meal and toast him with the non-alcoholic beverage of his choice. He'd given Ian a total doing. "Why do you have to make things so difficult?" he asked her. He started sliding slowly down the wall. "You could have worked for us, you know. We had you marked out as having potential, but now you've fucked up a major police operation. Well done. But we'll get Helen Sopel. She's going nowhere. Mona, are you okay?" The Gov was sounding frantic. "I'm fine," she shouted, then turned and ran as fast as she could up the stairs. The skylight was still open, and she stepped out into the darkness. The roof was deserted. Chapter 15. "Where to?" The taxi driver sat with one hand on the wheel, awaiting instructions. Bernard looked at Lucy and Helen, who both looked back at him. He had, literally, no idea where he should be taking them. He should probably have asked Mona where he was supposed to go. He should probably have asked Mona a lot of things about what she was expecting him to do. But there hadn't been time. Helen took charge. "Centre of town, quick as you can." "Where are we going?" asked Bernard. "I don't know, but I thought getting away from here as fast as possible would be a really good idea." "Yes, of course. Have you any idea what was going on back there, Miss Sopel? Ian wasn't really planning to shoot us, surely?" Helen snorted. "Yes, he was. He'd have shot me without a second thought. The man has no conscience." Now that the adrenaline was leaving his body, Bernard could feel his usual state of apprehension flooding back. This time his anxiety was particularly focused on the fact that he had just broken the nose of someone who was apparently a cold-blooded killer. Oh dear. He wondered how Lucy was bearing up to the evening's events. He was pretty shaken, and he was used to the ups and downs of life at the Het. Lucy was used to the ups and downs of life at the museum. He looked past Helen to the far side of the taxi, where Lucy was staring out of the window. "Lucy?" "Yes." "Are you okay?" "I think so. Just trying to take it all in." He leaned forward. "You were so clever suggesting that we climb over the roof and use a different fire escape. I'm sure that's what let us get away." She smiled at him, then reached past Helen and lightly touched his hand. "And you were magnificent back there. I've never seen anyone be so brave." He felt himself blush. "Oh, for God's sake," said Helen, returning Lucy's hand to her own side of the taxi. "It's his job. Can we focus here?" Bernard opened his mouth to say that nowhere in his job description did it say anything about facing down supposed colleagues armed with a gun, then thought better of it. Helen didn't seem that much less scary than Ian. "I want to speak to a journalist." I thought you weren't allowed to talk to the press, he asked. Haven't you signed the Official Secrets Act? She looked irritated. Yes, but if it's a choice between being dead or being in prison, I know which option I'll choose. Dead? Bernard was still struggling with this formulation of events. Are you sure Ian wasn't just trying to what? Scare me? Give me a good talking to? I'm an embarrassment to the government. We could go to the Scotsman's offices, said Lucy helpfully. This brought a curt shake of the head. No, I don't know who I can trust there. Can we go somewhere quiet where I can think? We can't go to my house. Ian might know where I live, said Bernard. Did Ian know where he lived? He was definitely going to have a few sleepless nights. And Karina knows where I live, said Lucy. Oh, I know. My parents are on holiday. We could borrow their house for a couple of hours, assuming there won't be any more men with guns. Mum and Dad really wouldn't like that. I certainly hope not. Bernard wasn't sure if he could face down any more guns, particularly any held by Ian Jacobson, who would surely be nursing a very big grudge against him. Just tell the driver the address, please, said Helen impatiently. Bernard was taking quite a dislike to this woman. Lucy's parents lived in a detached house in Crammond, with a side garage and a neat garden out front. The taxi had driven past street after street of other similar houses before pulling up. Bernard felt reassured by the anonymity of the surroundings. Safe in suburbia. Take a seat, said Lucy, ushering them into the living room. There was an upright piano against one wall. Bernard wondered if Lucy played. He'd put money on her being able to roll out a sonata or two, a little Chopin, or Bach, perhaps. She was probably extremely musically gifted, as well as intelligent and brave. Helen threw herself onto the sofa. Shall I pop the kettle on? Asked Lucy, although there might not be any milk in the fridge. I need a journalist I can trust, said Helen to the room in general. One who will put my side of the story. Your side, said Bernard. He was about to challenge what her side might actually be when he remembered that Lucy was still in the room, and probably shouldn't hear any more. Any chance of that cup of tea? Oh, yes, I'll see what I can do. He waited until the door closed behind her, then returned to Helen Sopel.
End of CD 8. CD 9.
I really can't see any way a journalist could make this a sympathetic story. What you were doing to children in the developing world was awful. People would be appalled, whatever spin you put on it. Oh, grow up. She raised a couple of exasperated eyebrows in his direction. We already see these countries as a source of spare parts. We do not, Bernard was outraged. What about all the tourists who head to India to get a kidney bought from a local, or who use a surrogate mother from one of the poorer corners of South America? Everyone is opposed to these kinds of things until they go through a medical crisis of their own, and they find out how long they have to wait in the NHS, or how much it'll cost them to jump the queue. Then suddenly they find themselves able to think the unthinkable, and before you know it, they're whipping out their credit card and getting themselves on the next flight to some god-forsaken hole or other. And now the entire country is in the middle of a crisis. People are ready for this kind of thinking. I'm sorry, but I don't believe that. If the project succeeds, there's not a parent in the land who wouldn't be giving thanks and stocking up on our pills. Bernard's mobile rang, flashing up an unfamiliar number. He regarded it with some trepidation, but pressed the button to accept the call. Hello? Bernard, it's me. Mona, are you? Yes, I'm fine. Phone me back from a landline on this number. He popped his head into the kitchen, where Lucy was busy putting cups onto a tray. Okay if I use your phone? Of course, it's in the hall. He dialed, and Mona answered on the first ring. Where are you? He gave her the address. It's Lucy's parents' house. They're not here. Excellent, I'm on my way. Is everything okay at your end? Yes, I think so. He lowered his voice, although I have to say I don't much like Helen Sopel. He peered through the crack in the door into the living room. Lucy seemed to be showing Helen the contents of her parents' drinks cabinet. We don't have to like her. We just have to get her into a health check, somehow. She thinks Ian wants to kill her. There was a silence. She might be right. What about us, Mona? Are we in danger? She ducked the question. I'm on my way. Before you hang up, she says she wants to talk to a journalist. She wants this in the public domain. Thinks it'll save her life. She's probably right. But she doesn't know who she can trust. And then I thought you, know a journalist. Not the kind of journalist I like, but I'm sure she'd love this story. The phone was silent. Mona, are you still there? I'm not sure I want to go there, Bernard. Really? Because I'm thinking that it might not just be Helen Sopel that's safer with all this out in the open. Where do we fit into all this? There was a long sigh. I'll pick her up en route. Chapter 16. So, I was right about Helen Sopel. Elaine grinned at her. She explained the situation in a phone call, which had been surprisingly short given the complexity of the issues involved. She suspected Elaine could tell a good story from bad in the first 2 sentences. Now they were in Elaine's car, driving through quiet back streets, heading for Cramond. Stop gloating. I'm not. I'm just delighted that when you wanted to give a journalist such a fabulous scoop, your first thought was little old me. You were the only journalist I had a phone number for. I tend to avoid them, especially the muckraking type. Well, I'm glad you held your nose and called me anyway. God, it's good to see you, Mona. Can you move your hand back to the steering wheel, please? Elaine's fingers were gently massaging the top of Mona's leg. It was very distracting. We need to focus. She looked as they passed yet another street of detached houses. Number 37, I think we're here. So, are you sure this Sopel woman will talk to me? She requested a journalist, so I guess so. Let's find out. Mona spotted a pair of nervous eyes and a slightly balding head sticking out from behind the curtain in the front room of the house. She waved to Bernard, who disappeared from view, appearing again a second later at the front door. Come in. He still looked worried. Helen's had a couple of whiskies. Not sure if that's a great idea, Bernard. That's what I said, but she's not an easy woman to reason with. They're in here. He pushed open a door, revealing a large and airy living room. Helen and Lucy eyed her from their seat on a cream leather sofa. Helen was nursing what looked like a double, and Lucy was nursing a worried expression. She'd get Bernard to replace whatever bottle it was that Helen was currently destroying. Is she a journalist? Helen pointed at Elaine. Elaine McGilvery, delighted to meet you. She extended a hand. Helen didn't take it, and after an awkward moment, she pulled her arm back. McGilvery, I know that name. Helen's brow wrinkled as she tried to join the dots, then smoothed out as realization hit. You're Cassandra Doom. Guilty as charged. Your column is appalling. Helen threw back the last of her drink. The kind of gutter journalism that you indulged in made our job tackling the virus 10 times harder. Your lowest denominator populism led to us abandoning good ideas because we know the spin that Cassandra bloody Doom would put on them. Elaine smiled. That may or may not be true, but the most important thing is that people do actually read my column in huge numbers. So you can talk to me, and the whole of Scotland will be talking about it tomorrow. Or we can wait and see if The Guardian can fit you in for a profile sometime next week. If you can guarantee this goes out tomorrow, the interview's yours. Bernard's face was contorting through a variety of expressions of disgust. Mona had some sympathy with his feelings. OK, Helen, let's head over to my office then, just in case anyone has worked out where you are. Hang on. Mona stepped swiftly into the doorway to stop anyone from leaving. Miss Sopel needs to attend a health check in the very near future. Oh, for God's sake! Helen looked furious. Miss Sopel, my colleagues and I have risked life and limb to track you down for this health check, and it's just as well that we caught up with you when we did, or who knows what would have happened to you. I know that you're very keen to speak to the press, but... Mona, began Elaine. And yes, I know that you are also keen to get the interview, but... Mona, stop. She put a hand on her arm. It's really not a problem. Isn't it? We have a sympathetic doctor, darling, Helen's not the first interviewee who's been a bit naughty with their health care. She winked, and in spite of herself, Mona smiled. Well, I'll need to come and oversee it. Fine, fine. There was a breezy wave of the hand. Shall we? Chapter 17. So, what now? Asked Lucy. The house felt very quiet now that the others had left. I don't know, said Bernard. Were you planning to stay here, or did you want to go back to your own home? Home, I suppose. She thought for a moment. I'm not really supposed to be here. They only left me the key in case there was an emergency. I'll see you back to your house. Oh, I couldn't put you to any trouble, said Lucy. He smiled. Believe me, it's the least we can do after what you've been put through. It has been quite an evening, she admitted. I'm still getting my head round everything that's happened. She stood up, collecting her mug and Helen's empty glass as she went. I'll just get these. Okay. He watched as she left. Would this be a good time to suggest meeting up again? He could frame it in the context of concern about her, wanting to check she was okay. Maybe tomorrow, over coffee? His thinking was interrupted by the sound of his ringtone. He dug out his phone and saw Patterson's name on the screen. His hand lingered reluctantly over the small green telephone icon. Someone needed to update Patterson on everything that had happened since he'd summoned him earlier. But he really hoped that Mona had already done it. She hadn't updated him on what the official version of events was. Bernard, have you heard from Mona? I'm trying to ring her, but she's not answering. Damn. She's fine, there's really nothing to worry about. That might not be entirely true. Thank God. Last time I saw her, Ian Jacobson was holding her over a banister, and Jacobson was in a terrible state, his face all smashed in. I think he had a broken arm. Someone had given him a right doing, but I couldn't get any sense out of him or Bob Ellis. Oh, yes. Actually, that was me. What was you? The, doing? That was you? Why did... The ramblings at the other end of the phone were getting increasingly incoherent. What the hell is going on here, Bernard? Why are my colleagues suddenly trying to kill each other? He didn't answer. Right, I'm coming over. Where are you? Bernard started to panic. He didn't know what was going on. He couldn't explain it. He'd broken probably every rule in the Het handbook, and possibly some criminal laws as well. And worst of all, he was still at Lucy's parents' house. His potential relationship stood no chance of blossoming if Lucy watched him being savaged by Patterson. Actually, Mr. Patterson, I'm not at work any longer. I am now on my, own time. Your own time? Patterson's voice was probably audible in Glasgow. He held the mobile a little further away from his ear. Do you not think that this is exactly the wrong time to be clocking off? Bernard didn't have an answer for this, so did the only thing that he could do and hung up. He turned the phone to silent. There would be consequences, but he'd deal with them later, when he was far, far away from Lucy. And given the amount of trouble he was in, he decided he might as well be hung for a sheep as for a lamb. Let's call a taxi, Lucy. The Het office will pay. Oh, if you're sure. She started gathering up her possessions, and it was now or never. Would it be all right if I gave you a ring tomorrow, just to, check if you're okay? She smiled. That's so thoughtful. Yes, of course. Lying in bed that night, Bernard smiled to himself. Despite the horrors of the day, he felt a certain sense of achievement. Although he'd done nothing that Maitland could describe as a move, Lucy certainly hadn't discouraged him from getting in touch. And she had commented on his bravery. And she'd touched his hand in the taxi. He could definitely be in a worse position. He rolled over, wrapping himself up in the duvet in an attempt to get warm. His eyes were closing when the thought occurred to him that, in the morning, not only was he going to have to explain himself to Patterson, he was also going to have to deal with Ian Jacobson, Anne Stuttle, and possibly Police Scotland if they wanted to charge him for assaulting a policeman. He rolled over on his back. In spite of his tiredness, he suspected this was going to be a sleepless night. Chapter 18. The streets were deserted. She'd given up trying to find a cab and set off on foot from Elaine's office back to her mother's house. Her feet were weary, but she was glad of the opportunity to think over the evening's events. She'd need all her thoughts in order before she went into work tomorrow. If she had to face the music, she wanted it to be with a conductor's baton. Stifling a yawn, she had a quick look over her shoulder to check that the streets remained deserted. She half expected to see Bob Ellis standing behind her, ready to finish what Ian had started. Stopping at the end of her mother's street, she had a final look around. To her dismay, there was a car parked across the driveway of her mother's house. She reviewed her choices, turn tail and flee, but then she would be leaving her mother to the mercy of whoever the visitor was. Not an option. Call for backup? Difficult to think who exactly would come to the rescue. She sidled closer to the house, and as she did, the passenger door was flung open. "Get in," she hesitated. "Get in, Mona. I'm fed up of being messed about." "Sorry, Gov." She got into the car, pulling the door shut gently behind her. "How did you know I was here?" "Credit me with some detecting ability, Mona, seeing as you credit me with nothing else. Any chance of you telling me what the hell is actually going on?" Turning away from him toward the window, she noticed that the hall light was still on in her mother's house. "I'm not sure I know what's going on, Gov, but I can certainly tell you what happened this evening." She went through the events of the evening as quickly as she could, trying to keep any emotion out of her voice. If she stopped to think about what had happened, she wasn't sure she could control herself. Patterson listened in silence. "Bernard faced down a man with a gun." "He did indeed. He's actually pretty good under pressure, just really bad when he has time to think about things." "Pretty high-risk strategy, hitting a man with a gun in his hand." He shook his head in disbelief. "He could have ended up getting one of you killed." "I know. I told him that, and I'll have a chat with him about gun safety when all this is over. But it wasn't entirely irrational, Gov. He thought Jacobson was shepherding us all into a room so he could kill us. He'd already threatened to shoot me if Bernard didn't appear." "Well, he's got more balls than I credited him with, I'll say that." "And the thing is, Gov, I don't know if he was right or wrong about it. Maybe Jacobson was going to shoot us. What do you reckon his game is? Whose side is he on?" "No idea. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but do you need to lie low for a while? Just until we can figure out what the story is?" She shook her head. "Oh no, I'll be back at work tomorrow. I've done nothing wrong. We were looking for a health defaulter and we found her. Every single thing that Bernard and I did tonight was a legitimate reaction to the situation we found ourselves in." "Do you think Stuttle will see it that way?" "It's not Stuttle I'm worried about. Unfortunately, I don't know who it is I should be worried about." "Anything you need, Mona. Anything at all. You just have to ask. And bloody Bernard. What a star, eh?" In spite of himself, Patterson cracked a small smile. She smiled back. "Good night, Gov." The key scraped the metal as she put it into the lock. She winced and edged the door open as quietly as she could. "You're back late?" Her mother materialised in the hallway, her dressing gown on. "Mum, it's—" She looked at her watch. 2 a.m? "I was worried, Mona. You didn't say you were going to be late. What have you been doing?" What had she been doing? Her job, obviously, and on paper the result was a good one. A difficult-to-find health defaulter had been tracked down and delivered to a health check. There was a big tick for that. But the other stuff, she wasn't entirely sure what exactly she'd been thinking. Bravely doing her public-spirited duty to highlight wrongdoing, or foolhardy meddling into something that was none of her business. She opted for the one word that was definitely true. Working. "I'll make you a cocoa." "You don't need to bother, Mum." But she was gone. She stumbled through to the living room and sat on the sofa. And Bernard, God bless him, had shown levels of bravery and ingenuity she would not have known he had in him. And she'd left him to make sure his new friend was okay. She was glad he had a girlfriend. He deserved it. A yawn swallowed her. Tomorrow was another day. Whatever the fallout was, she'd deal with it. She closed her eyes. By the time her mother came back into the room, she was snoring. Friday, making the papers. Chapter 1. For the third time that week, Bernard was in early. After a fairly sleepless night, he decided the best thing was to get up, head to the office, and find out if he was either sacked or under arrest. The week's events had left him well aware that the Het was a difficult organisation to leave voluntarily, so he assumed that they wouldn't be in any hurry to sack him if they could avoid it. However, breaking the arm of a co-worker, whatever the circumstances, might be pushing organisational tolerance to its limits. So here he was, bright and early, ready to learn his fate. Except, to his surprise, he was the only person there. He'd been sure Mona would have shared his "let's get this over with" mentality, unless something had happened to her. He pulled out his phone to make contact, and quickly shoved it back into his pocket when Patterson flung the door open. His head moved swiftly back and forth as he surveyed the room. "Where is everybody?" "I don't know," said Bernard. Have you spoken to Mona?" "Yes, you can relax. Your designated spokeswoman has brought me up to speed on what's been happening. And when all this is over, you and I are going to have a serious conversation about who you answer to. I'm your line manager, not Mona White, whatever she may think. You need to keep me informed." "When will this be?" "What?" "Our serious conversation." "Well, I don't know. Does it matter?" "If you're going to be shouting at me, Mr. Patterson, I'd like a time frame for when it's likely to be." "Bernard, you're an idiot." He wondered if that was the extent of the serious conversation that they were going to have. He thought about attempting to clarify the situation, but his boss's expression didn't really invite follow-up questions. "Anyway," began Patterson, then stopped, catching sight of something over Bernard's shoulder. Bernard turned to see Carol, hovering in the doorway. Patterson flung his arms up in the air. "Fantastic! As if I don't already have enough to contend with. Now you've decided to show up. Well, whatever attitude you've brought to work today, you can stuff it. I'm not in the mood." "No attitude," said Carol, holding her hands up in a gesture that resembled a POW surrendering. She pulled the door closed behind her, sat in the nearest chair, and started taking her coat off. "Huh?" Patterson eyed her suspiciously. "Really," she nodded. "I feel terrible about what happened to Maitland. It was the worst moment of my life, thinking that something had happened to him, and that I was partly to blame." "So you're back at work and planning to behave yourself?" "If by that you mean am I willing to work hard and not cause trouble, yes." "Are you dropping the lawsuit then?" asked Bernard. She shook her head. "No, I'm afraid not. I don't want to work at the Het any more, but I am going to try and do a good job until my lawyers get me out of here." "Well, what a fabulously motivated team I have," Patterson grunted. "And I'd keep the hell out of Stuttle's way if I were you." There was a gentle tap at the door. "That'll be Maitland saying he's willing to come back to work, but his lawyer says he needs 40 minutes siesta every afternoon." Patterson pulled open the door. "Marcus!" Marcus was a vision of despair. His hair was half hanging out of its ponytail, and his T-shirt showed all the signs of being slept in. There was a large stain on the leg of his jeans, which Bernard hoped was spilt coffee. And judging by the bags under his eyes, Bernard wasn't the only one who'd had a sleepless night. "You were the last person I expected to see today," said Patterson. "Are you okay?" He pulled out a chair and Marcus half sat, half fell into it. "It was awful," said Marcus. For a horrible minute, Bernard thought his friend was about to cry. He looked over at Patterson, who shot him a slightly helpless look in return. Fortunately, Carol stepped up to the plate. She moved into the chair next to Marcus, slid her arms round him, and gave him a hearty, maternal hug. He rested his head on her shoulder and sniffed loudly. "Have you had any breakfast?" she asked. "Would you like me to fetch you something?" "A cup of tea would be nice." He sat back upright and wiped his eyes. "Milk, no sugar." "Milk, no sugar," she repeated and headed out the door. "But they let you go," said Patterson. "Yes, Mr. Patterson," said Marcus. "I spent the night in a meeting room on the second floor. They were going to transfer me to a station with cells, but decided against it. The police officer's exact words were, 'Consider yourself lucky that you're a friend of Ian Jacobson,' which is strange because I don't think I've said more than 2 sentences to him in my life." Bernard looked over at Patterson, who was staring thoughtfully into space. Anyway, Marcus continued, about midnight last night, they worked out that I was in the middle of a very long phone call to the head officer in West Lothian, who had accidentally deleted a registry file when the bomb hoax call was made. At midnight? Why didn't they let you go then? They said I was free to go, but the PC who locked me in the interview room took away my belt, my money and my shoes. By the time they released me, she'd gone home and nobody knew what she'd done with them. I still haven't had them back. Bernard looked down at Marcus's feet, which were clad only in a pair of bright blue socks with an S for Superman logo on them. It struck him that no one had ever looked less like a superhero than Marcus did at that moment. Well, that explains what the fragrant smell is in here, said Patterson. Bernard, nip down to the front desk and see if you can reunite the man with his shoes so we can all breathe easily again. Sorry, said Marcus. If I'd known the turn of events were going to take yesterday, I'd have worn clean socks and underwear. Bernard sincerely hoped that he meant clean underwear. I'll see what I can do. It took 3 phone calls and trips to 2 different offices to finally locate all of Marcus's belongings. Bernard hurried back toward his temporary office, with the plastic bag of goods tucked under his arm. En route, he caught sight of a newspaper stand and was reminded about Helen Sopel's interview. He grabbed a Daily Citizen and paid his money at the kiosk. He was keen to read the article before drawing Patterson's attention to its existence. Mona's debrief may not have included updating Patterson about the interview between Helen Sopel and her girlfriend, or whatever Cassandra Doom actually was to Mona. He spread the paper out on the table, but before he had time to locate the Cassandra Doom column, he heard his name being called. He turned in the direction of the voice and saw an apparition that was probably Ian Jacobson. He wasn't instantly recognisable under the facial bandages, purple bruising, and the sling, although the dressings did correlate to where he'd hit him last night. If Marcus had looked bad, Ian looked a million times worse, and the most awful thing about his appearance was the expression with which he was regarding Bernard. If looks could kill, he was going to be very, very dead indeed. "Bernard," he snarled. What are you doing here?" He crunched up the newspaper and started looking round for a way out. "I work here. I'm a police officer, remember?" The kind of police officer that tries to shoot unarmed civilians. He remembered that much only too well. Bernard wondered if he should say something. Should he shout? Tell the other officers at Fettes that there was an armed criminal in the building? He decided his safest option was to get back to the meeting room where his colleagues were and try to tell Patterson what he thought was going on. He would know what to do. Unfortunately, Jacobson was in between him and the safety of his line manager. "You don't look well, Ian," he tried. "Are you taking the piss? It's not surprising I look like shit, given what you did to me last night. But 6 to 8 weeks, Bernard, and this thing comes off." With his good hand, he pointed at his sling. 6 to 8 weeks, then you better start watching out for yourself. You better start looking over your shoulder. "Okay," Bernard was happy to accept Ian's suggestion. He was very much planning to keep looking over both shoulders for the foreseeable future. Ian's only visible eye stared at him. "Is Mona in yet?" "I don't think so." "Well, as soon as she gets here, tell her she's wanted at Stuttle's office." His stomach lurched. Was this the beginning of the process of sacking, stroke jailing, stroke possible executions? Just Mona? For now. But I can find you anytime I need to. For emphasis, he poked Bernard with his remaining good hand. Bernard noted that it still packed quite a punch. He sidestepped around Ian and hurried back to their temporary office. "Mr. Patterson, Ian Jacobson's downstairs and I think he wants to kill me." "From what I heard, he's got good reason to." Patterson looked up from the laptop. "Ignore him. He's not going to come anywhere near you under the circumstances." Bernard did not feel particularly comforted by this. "But maybe I'll have an accident some dark night in a few months' time." "Morning all." Maitland appeared in the office, followed by Carol, holding a plastic cup. Oh, look who it is. We were about to start looking underneath desks to see if you were asleep somewhere. Yeah, sorry about that, Gov. Stuttle wants to see you when you're feeling better. OK, he grinned. Why are you looking so cheerful? Stuttle's not inviting you round for tea and cake, you know. I get that, but I've just escaped a near-death experience, so of course I'm cheerful. And having just cheated death makes you think about things. So, as soon as I got out of hospital, I decided to seize the day. Long and short of it is, I've asked Kate to marry me, and I'm delighted to say she said yes. That's wonderful news, said Carol. She leapt up to hug him. Maitland was still beaming from ear to ear. She wants to finish her degree and everything first, but I think we're looking at a summer wedding next year. Congratulations, said Patterson. Have you been thinking about this for a while? Yes, muttered Bernard, ever since he found out she wouldn't sleep with him until they were married. Maitland winked at him. It's going to be the best wedding night ever. Bernard wondered if there was any way at all he could talk Kate out of making the biggest mistake of her life. Patterson slapped a £20 note on the table. In the light of the happy event, it's bacon rolls all round, and I'm buying. You two, he pointed at Maitland and Carol, shift your arses down to the canteen. Bernard waited until they left, then turned to Patterson. Mona has to go and see Mr. Stuttle. I know, Stuttle phoned here as well. She's on her way. What do you think Mr. Stuttle's going to say to her? He asked. I've no idea, Bernard. Nobody ever tells me anything. Patterson sighed. I suspect it's not a tea and cake invite for her either. But if it's an out-and-out bollocking about yesterday's fiasco, I would have thought you'd be in the firing line too. Hopefully she will come back to us with some answers to whatever the hell has been going on. But until someone tells us otherwise, I suggest we get on with doing the day job. Has anyone tried to see if the computer systems are working yet? I'll have a look, said Marcus. Does anyone have a laptop? Here, take mine, said Patterson. I bought a newspaper, said Bernard. I think there's going to be an interview with Helen Sopel in it today. In the Citizen? Why is she talking to that pile of... Realisation hit him. It's Cassandra Doom, isn't it? Actually, yes, Mr. Patterson, I'm afraid so. Miss Sopel wanted everything out in the open, you know. She wanted everyone to know what the Carmichaels had been up to. Is this Mona's doing? Patterson snatched the paper out of his hand and swept through the pages, muttering as he went. He found the columns smoothed out by the now rather battered page and started reading. Ham-fisted Het officers do it again. That's an odd headline, said Bernard. He moved to the other side of the table so he could read it for himself. Mona saved Helen Sopel's life. I thought this would be a positive article about us. It gets better. The stormtroopers of the Het have really surpassed themselves this time. Not content to stick to harassing the general public, they have now endangered a brand new multi-million-pound virus research partnership with the University of Lawawi by holding the civil servant leading on it hostage until she participated in one of their pointless health checks. Helen Sopel said, "This really was ridiculous. I missed my flight and some crucial meetings. We are fully supportive of the health check regime, but I am needed urgently in Democratic Republic of Africa to begin the research project. I had to call on Carlotta Carmichael to resolve the situation. She will be having a very serious conversation with the Scottish Health Enforcement Partnership about the Het's heavy-handed approach. Another triumph of jackboots over common sense for the Het." Patterson screwed the paper up into a ball and flung it at the wall. "I don't understand. None of that is true," said Bernard. "In fact, it's the exact opposite of the truth. And why is she suddenly best friends with Carlotta Carmichael?" "Because she struck a deal, Bernard. She's obviously made one last call to Carlotta, and they've agreed some arrangement where Sopel keeps her mouth shut about what's been happening, and, by the sounds of things, gets the job as project director of this new research project. She's probably on a plane to Africa, even as we speak." "But why would Cassandra Doom change the story?" "Because she's a dirty lowlife. Sell her own mother for a story. Gutter journalist, Bernard. And in case we forget, Mona's girlfriend." Marcus's clattering on the laptop keyboard stopped. "She's what?" Friend, who happens to be a girl, said Bernard quickly. Finding out about Mona's sexuality at this precise moment might just tip Marcus over the edge. He'd work up to telling him, maybe in 2 to 3 months' time. Whatever, Patterson continued. The journalists will have had some kind of bribe as well. Then everyone who knows anything about the previous research trials will have been bought off or silenced. On the one hand, we've got a museum director with the best-funded small museum in Scotland, and on the other, a professor who's too scared to open his mouth in case his family get hurt. Mona is probably being offered her bribe over at Shep HQ even as we speak. And the only other people who know anything are right here in this room. I'm not particularly happy with that thought. I'm not entirely sure I know what's going on, Mr. Patterson, said Marcus. So, what do we do? Asked Bernard. I don't know, Bernard. I really don't. We hope for the best and keep doing the day job. That might not be that easy, said Marcus. There's something very, very strange happening with the computer systems. I've tried logging in as myself, then as the administrator. I've tried to get into the North Edinburgh Het site, then the other Lothian ones. Then I tried Aberdeen, just for a change, and the same thing keeps happening. Cut to the chase, Marcus. What thing keeps happening? This? He spun the laptop round to show them a completely blank screen. Is it dead? Asked Patterson. Give it a minute. White words started flashing up on the screen. Watch this space. Patterson flung his hands up. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Marcus and Bernard looked at each other and shrugged. I'm phoning Stuttle. Patterson started pressing buttons on his mobile. This is ridiculous. Bernard reached down to his feet for the balled-up newspaper and started unfurling it. I wonder if Mona has seen this yet. Chapter 2. Mona was not furious. She spread the newspaper out across her knees and read the article for the second time, confirming to herself that she was definitely, absolutely, not furious. Because fury did not begin to describe the level of rage she was currently feeling. There would have to be a whole new word invented and inserted into the dictionary to adequately describe how she felt at that moment. There just wasn't a pre-existing term to describe the emotion that had resulted from being betrayed both personally and professionally by someone she had misguidedly allowed herself to trust. Someone that she had been considering allowing into her life. She pressed Elaine's number on her mobile. It's Mona. There was a brief silence. You've seen the paper then, darling? Yes, I've seen the bloody paper. What the hell's going on? Elaine sighed. I was played. She told me half the story, then disappeared off to the bathroom. While she was there, I'm guessing she made one last desperate phone call to the Carmichaels. Because 10 minutes later, Jonathan and a couple of heavies arrived and told me and my editor that there's no story. You're a journalist. You're not supposed to cave into that kind of pressure. Really, darling, you're a bit of a late convert to freedom of the press. Sometimes you just have to roll with these things. But it was a story you would have killed to get. There are better stories. The penny dropped. And you've been offered one. Several, actually. Well, fuck you. I'm sorry, Mona. This is the world I live in. I didn't want things to work out like this because I really do like you. And if you want to take a bit of time to calm down, maybe we can see each other again, well away from work. That's so not going to be happening. Well, that's a shame. But whatever happens, Mona, promise me that you will be careful. We might have got the promise of a couple of good stories, but it was underpinned by a lot of threats. If we'd insisted on publishing, I think things would have got pretty nasty. She ended the call and hurried the last few yards to Shep's offices. Before she turned into the courtyard in front of the building, she stopped. Teresa, Patterson, Elaine. In the last 24 hours, the three of them had all urged her to be careful. All trying to be helpful, of course, and all of them probably right to worry about her. But the one thing no one had been able to tell her, the crucial missing piece of information, was who exactly it was that she was in danger from. She looked at the magnificent wooden door in front of her. Until the beginning of the week, she'd have regarded the people at CHEP as on her side. But now she wasn't so sure. What if the people in this meeting were the very people she should be careful around? There was a possibility she wouldn't come back out of this meeting a free woman. She looked back out onto the high street, indecision staying her feet. She could skip this meeting, but sooner or later they'd catch up with her. At least this way Patterson knew where she was. Before she could change her mind, she strode across the quad and into the building. The conversation stopped when Mona walked into Stuttle's office. There were 3 people in the room: Stuttle, Ian Jacobson, and Bob Ellis. "What are they doing here?" said Mona. "We need to talk to you," said Ian, his mouth moving awkwardly in his battered face. He'd been patched up pretty well since yesterday, but there was no doctor in the land who would have signed him fit for work. But considering the rules, regulations, and criminal laws that Ian had broken the previous night, he probably wasn't too worried about the niceties of HR processes. Again, a new word was called for to describe the emotion relating to seeing someone who was so obviously in pain, but had totally brought it on himself. The mixed emotion of feeling sympathy towards someone brought so low, and a very real anxiety that, despite all that, he could still do her harm. This was not a safe place to be. "I'm not interested in anything that someone who pointed a gun at me last night has to say." She turned to leave, only to find the sturdy form of Bob Ellis between her and the door. "Could you get out of my way, please?" She folded her arms and tried to project a confidence she didn't feel. Bob was a big man, with bulging muscles in all the right places, and one bulge that suggested, as Bernard would have it, that he was packing heat. Bob just smiled and showed no intention of moving. "Mona, sit down for God's sake." Stuttle gestured toward a seat. "We want to talk to you about Millwood orders." There was no way she was getting out of the room, so she decided to pretend her interest had been piqued by this. "Millwood orders? What are they?" He regarded her for a moment, then laughed. "You are better at bluffing than your boss. I'll say that much for you, Mona. I'm going to assume from your close personal friendship with Professor Bertram Fowler that you're well aware of what I'm talking about." She shrugged. "Ian and Bob have both been involved in supporting and protecting the participants in some of our Millwood projects. Minding them, you mean? Checking no one stepped out of line? I prefer my wording. Now, the exceptional nature of a Millwood project requires an exceptional approach to policing, perhaps a little bit more robust than would usually be the case. Like threatening to shoot unarmed civilians, for example? I was doing my job." Even under the bruising, Mona could see irritability written across Ian's face. "I'm not sure you lot shouldn't be under some kind of charge for interfering with the investigation, and Bernard should be charged with assault for what he did to me." Now, Ian," said Stuttle. "This comes with the territory. Mona was right. They didn't know what was happening. Everyone was taken by surprise, and, unfortunately, this is where it ended up. All we can do now is try and limit the damage." "Bernard won't be charged, will he?" asked Mona. "That rather depends on you, and Bernard, and, in fact, Marcus." "I don't understand." There was a long and, she thought, slightly wistful sigh from Stuttle. "One of our other Millwood operatives has gone rogue. We believe you and your colleagues are in a position to help us track him down." "Who?" She racked her brains to think who she could possibly assist with. The realization hit her. Bryce. Bryce was part of Millwood. Stuttle gave a small, slow nod. "What a total cock-up. One of yours, was it, Ian?" She grinned at him, and he returned a look of utter hatred in her direction. It was a look filled not just with contempt, but also rage. She'd seen that look before, when he had been pushing her backwards over the banister at the museum. It was a look that screamed lack of self-control, and she wondered for the second time about Ian's stability. Nathan McVie had fallen to his death rather than meet with him. Helen Sopel had been terrified when he turned up at the museum. She'd better stop baiting him, and warned Bernard to watch his back. She looked at Stuttle to see if he'd seen the look, but his head was down over his papers. She looked toward Bob, who was staring thoughtfully at Ian. He'd seen it too. She caught his eye, and he quickly looked away. Bryce has been embedded with the Het for some months now, keeping an eye out for us on the communications made by staff to make sure that no one is up to anything that's going to interfere with police inquiries. Usually that interference occurs due to incompetence by the Hets rather than the sterling work of your team. Anyway, he was feeding us a lot of misinformation about Marcus, which we think was meant as a distraction, said Stuttle. We think he's begun to identify a bit too much with some groups that he has been following. On Millwood orders? Unfortunately, yes. We have a Millwood operative out there gone rogue, and we need to get him back. We think your skills would be useful in doing that, Mona. What do you think about joining us? Obviously, we would get you Millwood clearance. Marcus and Bernard know Bryce better than anyone else, but may be reluctant to assist us without some guidance from you. Do Bernard and Marcus get an apology for how they've been treated? Don't push it, Mona. She folded her arms and glared at him. He stared back. There may be a personal interest in this for you, Mona. It was Bryce's shenanigans that led to you almost getting shot. He smiled, confident that he had her interest. Damn it, he did. A definitive answer to what had actually been going on the night that she and the professor had been ambushed was just about the only thing that would persuade her to go anywhere near Ian Jacobson ever again. Can I think about it? Not for long. Sleep on it. Give me an answer tomorrow. Sensing she was free to go, she stood up. Ian followed suit, and Bob held the door open. Bob, a word before you go. Stuttle gestured him back in. He nodded to Mona and closed the door, leaving her alone with Ian in the deserted office usually occupied by Stuttle's long-suffering secretary. Well, that was interesting, she said. Ian ignored her, staring fixedly at the door. It stuck in her craw to even be civil to him, but she realised it might be best not to antagonise him further. She wanted in on this Millwood stuff, and if that meant working with him, she'd just have to swallow it, even if his recent behaviour suggested he was verging on the unhinged. Look, Ian, about what I said back there, I didn't mean anything by it. He didn't respond, but walked past her, out to the magnificent stairway that led back to the main entrance. She hurried after him. OK, I'm sorry. We could end up working together on this Bryce thing, so we might as well be civil. With any luck, Stuttle would get him signed off for a good long break. Again, Ian said nothing. He was stock still, his eyes on the floor. There was a blankness to his expression, as if all the emotion in him had been emptied out. He looked like a man who had been pushed too far, and that couldn't be good for any of them. She wondered again about Ian and Bob's actual affiliations. She'd guessed they both had military background, but who they were actually working for now she still wasn't sure. Not the kind of person to take kindly to the humiliation he'd suffered yesterday. Cursing herself for winding him up, she gave up on her apologies and started walking down the stairs. I think you need some time off, Ian, to get over this. Give me a ring when... A hand hit her hard between her shoulder blades, pushing her up and off the stairs. Shock gave way to fear as she lost her footing and rolled over and over down the stairwell. She flung out an arm to try to grab at something, anything, that could slow her down. The wall loomed up ahead, and an image of her mother, frail and alone in her home, came into Mona's mind for the briefest of seconds, before she felt the back of her head connect with the plaster. The room went dark. Thrive and prosper. Final scene. The camera pans along a deserted street of derelict shops. In the foreground is Mrs. Hilda Millwood, a young mother in her late 20s. On either side of her are two small children, holding tight to her skirt. In the background of the shot, other women, children, and frail older people can be seen. The camera moves in closer and focuses on her face. In the background, the sound of shouting and children crying can be heard. Mrs. Millwood. The times that we have lived through have been truly the worst that our country and our world have ever experienced. Many of our people have died. Our strongest, our fittest, our finest men have been sacrificed. We cannot let their suffering be in vain. Together we can, and we must, rebuild all that we have lost. I am only a woman. My life has been my home and my children. I have supported my husband as he went out into the world, and he has provided for us in return. I have not the physical strength of a man, nor the university education of a leader, but we women must step up. We must all do tasks that we could not have imagined before this crisis. We must find the strength to risk our health, even our lives. Camera pans in even closer. Because if we do not take these risks for a better world, there is no one else. We must suffer the blows that are given to us. We must rise up, stronger, dust ourselves down, and move on with creating our new world, however battered and bruised we are. We cannot give up. That is the end of Death at the Plague Museum. It was written by Leslie Kelly and read by Angela Ness. This has been an Oak Hill Audiobooks presentation. For further details of our extensive catalogue of unabridged audiobooks, please call 0116 236 4325 or visit our website www.oakhillpublishing.co.uk.